tiny people and we play with them. Woo, woo. We paint tiny people and we play with them.
Hello and welcome to episode 16 of Miniatures Monthly. My name is Chris Thurston and as ever I'm joined by Tom Senior.
Hello.
Hi Tom.
That was a very excited hello.
Yeah, that was it.
Because boy, things are going to change around here.
They are. So this is going to be a slightly different episode than normal because there's so much news. There's so much news that I know that my certain major Sigmar thinking has been completely dominated by second edition.
Which is confirmed. It's happening.
Yeah.
And very soon.
But loads of other stuff as well. Like, when we were, almost to the extent that I want to push talking about Age of Sigmar second edition, which we're definitely going to do almost certainly at some length.
Yes.
About X minutes from now, just so that we can address some of the other news that in any other month would have been absolutely massive.
Yes.
And also to, even think about the fact that I went to the biggest Warhammer tournament I've ever been to this month. Almost seems like a small footnote in the
changing
rules
landscape
apocalypse. Yeah.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah, it's really exciting. So I wanted to open with something non-Warhammer related, just as a gesture at the notion this might not just be entirely an Age of Sigmar podcast, which is the announcement of Age of Sigmar. No,
Yeah.
That's my brain. X-Wing 2.0.
Hooray!
X-Wing second edition. So I have to kind of lay my cards on the table and say this is something I knew about and couldn't talk about, based on the work I did at Fantasy Flight a few months ago. But it's really, really, really exciting. And I think for me, in microcosm, it is done kind of, Age of Sigmar is, updating, and that update is so rapidly upon us that I think you and I have both felt that kind of like, maybe let's wait until second edition to play our next kind of big round of games or something.
For sure.
That's how I feel about X-Wing. Like, I was very unhappy with the state of X-Wing, and I've been so for quite a long time, and I know that I've talked about that on the podcast before. And this second edition is exactly what I wanted them to do to the game. And more than that, for me, it's almost like this is a strange thing, but like game designers communicate through game design, right? People do community posts and interviews and stuff, but principally the way you communicate, the way you'd like your game to be is by doing that.
Yeah, changing it.
And so whenever there's a big patch or for a video game or something like this for a miniatures game, for me, it's like, this is a statement or an FAQ, I guess, for a miniatures game. This is a statement about what they want the game to be. And what excites me so much about it is it's a statement of, we want to make the game that you miss, Chris. and a lot of people like me, I think. I know, Tom, you've played a bit of X-Wing, but like, not to the mad extent that I have.
No.
But like, I think this is quite exciting stuff for everybody because basically second edition represents a consolidation of every idea that crept in to X-Wing 1.0 over the course of 5 years. And sort of bringing them together so that they make sense together for the first time in years, basically. So, hugely revised rules when it comes to how turrets work. X-Wing is a game of like positioning and kind of very manual maneuvering skill.
Yeah.
And so the concept of a 360-degree firing arc, with a turret was something that was always a problem for the game, even when it was balanced or not. And it led to this arms race of offensive and defensive upgrades to get, to try and make that work. And it never did really. It was always a wonky sort of system. It's gone. Turrets, now work as a mobile arc that has to be rotated around the ship. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
There's a new system for the force in the game. Arcs are much more important. The way actions work has been revised so that you can, differentiate between ship chassis by what kinds of both what kinds of maneuvers they're capable of and what kind of actions those chain into, which is really nice and a kind of elegant expansion on what was already possible within that rule system, which is a rule system I love. It's just a rule system that wasn't designed to shoulder the weight of additional rules that eventually got piled upon it. Because there's a business incentive to add rules, that always are.
So did it get overwhelmed by the cards almost? The card layer seemed to take over it perhaps?
It did. And it's also that there wasn't enough space in that original design for them to keep adding new stuff without sort of throwing something out the window, if that makes sense. Like, so I'll give you the example. In X-Wing 1.0, ships have a dial, and those dials have maneuvers on them, and those maneuvers can be green, which relieves stress, and that's becoming blue in the new edition to help with color blindness, which is a nice touch.
Oh, that's good.
White, which doesn't apply stress to normal maneuver, and red, which gives you stress. And they added some new maneuvers as time went on, like various forms of doing a cool flip. That's a thing. Stopping, reversing became a thing for one particular ship. But there wasn't so much you could do with that. And then ships would have actions on their action bar, like taking a target lock or boosting or barrel rolling, those kinds of things. And then there was a universal upgrade called an elite pilot talent called Push the Limit, available to any pilot with the elite pilot talent upgrade slot, that would allow you to perform a second action after your first one in return for a stress token. This was added as a sort of like envisaged originally as a kind of ace technique.
It's like a exceptional TIE fighter pilot, like an interceptor would be able to barrel roll and then flip out and do something crazy.
Yeah, the art for Push the Limit is really cool. It's a TIE interceptor and an A-wing passing each other, like extremely close.
Yeah.
Like, and it's like both pilots are sort of playing chicken with one another, pushing the limit, if you will. However, Push the Limit was just one of those concepts that unfortunately kind of broke the game a bit, because in terms of efficiency, it's better than almost any other use of that slot.
Right.
So anything else that occupies the same upgrade slot has to be better or cheaper. And there's no argument there. So this is one example. There's so much to talk about potentially if this was an X-Wing podcast, but for example, this is a nice elegant bit of miniatures game design. Push the Limit is going away. It's just not going to be in the game anymore. However, they've introduced the concept of linked actions, which are on your ship's action bar. So, for example, I think it's the A-Wing can do a boost after a focus, and it has to be a boost, and that boost gives you a stress, which is how the old Push the Limit would have worked. Yeah. But it dictates what order the actions have to take place in. So you have to do a focus action and then a boost. And the TIE Interceptor is the only ship that can boost out of a barrel roll and barrel roll out of a boost, which is the old sort of repositioning combo. So in fact, what Push the Limit used to do for TIE Interceptors is now a core part of that ship, but it's specific to that ship. And that one little change gives you a huge amount of potential granularity in terms of how different ships feel. Because it used to be that if a ship had both boost and barrel roll on its action bar and room for Push the Limit, it would behave the same way as any other ship with that combo. Now, the precise order in which things can trigger, and whether or not a ship boosts into a defensive action or boosts into an offensive action or another repositioning action, fundamentally change the kinds of things, the way they feel. Yeah. Like, that's a hard concept to articulate if people haven't played X-Wing, but ships feel a particular way in X-Wing based on how you can move them specifically a lot of the time. And that's a huge strength of the game, but it's something that got eaten away as super powerful upgrades made everything kind of work the same way. And it's really exciting to see it kind of tighten like that.
I love that they explicitly said they wanted to make it a game about movement and positioning again, which is for me, one of the great strengths of X-Wing is the dial system, and it's having these little kind of, if you've never played X-Wing, basically you move your ships by using little rulers, and they're curved rulers or straight rulers, and they'll be like, a certain type of turn, and you go 2 along that sort of arc, and you literally put this ruler in front of the ship and then move the ship along the ruler, and it's very precise, and it's really, really fun, and leads to a lot of interesting sort of calamitous scenarios when you start playing. You start like as I did in the very start, fairly early on in X-Wing's life. You used to be able to run lots of TIE fighters, and there was a real genuine skill to organising those TIE fighters to fly in a cluster in formation and keep them from crashing into one another. So it really simulated that dogfighter fantasy that was the whole core of the X-Wing versus TIE fighter experience. And that was super exciting. And it did feel as though increasingly it just became about gaming the cards and gaming the upgrades, and it got way beyond me, for example. So for me, this second edition is a chance to get back on board with it completely, and hopefully from a place where everyone's learning at the same time, and I'll have a chance again.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting, because I'm used to a new wave of ships coming out, and those ships release upgrade cards into the entire ecosystem of the game, and then everyone gets excited and reapproaches old ships to see if anything's good now. That's going to happen to a pretty crazy degree because the way they're handling it, so it's a new core set, which you'd need in order to play second edition because the new templates, but also, new dials, new, damage deck, all of this stuff is important for the game. But also they're releasing, conversion kits for each of the existing factions that come with new cards and ship templates and bases and things and tokens for every single ship currently existing for those factions. So if you play a particular faction, then, it is an expense, but like, and I completely understand if people just play on the kitchen table and they don't have a problem with 1.0, then there's maybe a little bit of a why should I spend, 50, 60. So it's the core set is about 30 quid and the conversion kits are 35 each.
Yeah.
And 35 each for a box of card and cardboard pieces sounds like quite a lot. From an X-Wing point of view, that's nuts value because 35 quid is traditionally the price of a big ship expansion, which comes with maybe 20 cards.
And one ship.
And this is, they don't come with the models, but they come with, I think each one of them has upwards of 150 cards in it, and it's new pilots for every single ship in the game.
Right.
And also it represents a vast act of game design because they've redesigned every single pilot and ship and upgrade in the game.
Right.
So, and the other thing they're doing, which is taking, after Legion, and I think it's a sign of FFG's approach generally, is, they're changing it so that you will no longer need to buy, ships from factions you don't play to get every upgrade card.
Oh, thank God.
So if you only want to play Rebel, for example, and you just buy all of the Rebel expansions, you will have every card that Rebels can use. So there'll be nothing like random in a scum pack or something like that you'll find you need.
Yeah.
Which is super good news.
Yeah, agreed.
The other thing, and this is probably the biggest thing in some ways, because it's something I was asking for them to do for years, was they have removed points costs and upgrade slots from the cards with the pilots on them, basically.
Yeah.
This is a really big deal because changing printed material sucks, basically. And X-Wing, there's a tension, I think, between FFG and GW schools of design, where GW is kind of happy to have big books that you need the latest versions of for everything. And you probably need to print it out FAQ as well for those books. And those books change all the time, right? Like the Stormcast Battle Tome just went onto Last Chance to Buy because there's probably going to be a new one.
Yeah.
And so those big, lovely books become irrelevant from a rules point of view pretty regularly, particularly for factions like Space Marines and Stormcast and stuff.
Yeah.
X-Wing, FFG games never really work like that. They like to give you like printed cards for your units that you put next to the play space, and you can always see, what you've got, which is from a learning the game point of view is way friendlier than having to leaf through a codex or a battle tome. But it is nonetheless, it means that when something's wrong on those cards, sometimes the changes are pretty daunting, and it's really hard for them to reprint it. So what they've done is removed all the points costs from those cards, and there'll be an app launched alongside X-Wing 2.0 where points costs, which will include a squad builder that will use the current proved official points values and upgrade slots for given pilots.
Yeah.
And there's sort of talk of them allowing, this is a really nice idea, talk of them of allowing, tournament runners to sort of have specific, list building parameters that they send out to their players.
Yeah.
So, you as a tournament show runner, you could potentially say, well, we're going to remove all elite pilot talents from ships for this tournament. Go make a winning squad in this restriction.
Yeah. Which
feels super modern. That feels like, I felt like FFG pushed GW to get better at stuff 5 years ago when X-Wing came out, became super popular. And then GW have been on really, in terms of talking to the community, in terms of offering FAQs quickly, all of that stuff. GW have been ahead, basically, of that game for quite a long time. And this, I feel like, is FFG pushing back the other way, which is really healthy.
Yeah. It's super, I love to see this trend of decentralizing rules control and saying that, well, if you think something is overpowered, it's almost like, everyone house rules things, but giving tournament, scenes the permission to just go, we think that this type of turret build is boring, so please don't bring that to this tournament. Here's the pack. And just, you can, giving you the freedom and almost the authenticity of an app created by the people who actually made the game also gives significant power to people to just control the game themselves. And why not? FFG obviously own the rule set and stuff, but why not give that control to people who are most invested in your game, people who are hiring out massive halls and, you know, putting prize pools together and, you know, inviting people from all over the country and all over the world to play, give them the power to control the rules a little bit. I think that's quite inspiring, actually.
Yeah, indeed. It got some kind of silly responses. People worried that they were going to like suddenly change point costs midway through the World Championships.
Right.
And like invalidate people's squads on the way to the event. And no, like it's just a better way of putting out FAQ type information, really.
Yeah.
Because to be honest, with FAQs and stuff, like being able to change point values easily, forgoes a lot of the need for certain kinds of FAQs apart from certain clarifications. Because often, you know, people would rather like, you know, it's because that's necessary to nerf stuff because you can just make it more expensive or ban it.
Yeah.
Like, and that solves that problem, right? Like,
it does seem like X-Wing is a very tight game on the tabletop in terms of, it's very clear when something is in arc or out of arc. It's very clear when something has
yeah, sometimes it's a miracle of like millimeters and everyone gets a laser pointer out and then four different people gather around with their laser pointers and no one can decide to roll dice for it. Yeah. But yes, you're right in principle.
In principle, for the most part, it's actually it's a very clear game in many ways. A lot of it is very mathsy. It's a very, very kind of, it's in the dice, a lot of the game and a lot of the kind of probability of it. And that's the stuff that's the easiest to tweak with, little rules tweaks and FAQ tweaks. The problem that, Warhammer has, which is a game with a vastly broad rule set with all these thousands of war scrolls and different spells interacting, you get this kind of crazy sandbox where, words can be semantically reinterpreted to do other things on the tabletop, and it's like a different type of battle, isn't it? It's a different type of rules control. Yeah, maths versus just kind of intentionality of the rules.
I think like that did creep into X-Wing as well because some things just weren't clear. Like I've already seen some of that stuff in the 2.0 stuff for Age of Sigmar, which we can get to. Like. It's the more, well, this is the thing, when your rule set requires you to start introducing kind of exceptions and sort of like if then sort of stuff in order to meaningfully diversify the new rules you're putting out, then inevitably you open the door to kind of, confusion.
Yeah.
And, I think this is something we have a question about, which we'll get to later, but like, and confusion inevitably leads to not distrust between players, but it allows players to interpret in the way that favors them. And that's really tricky socially, right?
Yeah,
like I would argue there's a direct through line from overcomplicated rules writing to, not hostility necessarily, but the potential for hostility. And like, that's why is not only why these kinds of overhauls are so exciting for all these game systems, but it's why it's so important, or why I found it so heartening to have the developers make a statement like this. Like the sort of visible relief on their faces when they were announcing this. And I had a little bit of a peek behind the scenes, obviously, because I was out there working on a different project for them. It was like, because, you know, and I haven't seen this quite close up for GW, but like players will do absolutely anything, to either justify or condemn a game that they're not happy about or happy about. And so like, you know, I think X-Wing's meta has been pretty bad for quite a long time. Like it's gotten far, far away from the game that I really love. And, you know, I would have been going to the European Championships this week, but I'm just not interested. And 2.0 has almost given me a kind of weight off my shoulders because it's like in September, the game's going to get better. So I don't need to play it for 5 months or whatever, not even 5 months now, 3 months. You know, that's fine. Like, just, you know, let it go. And it's okay. And I can come back to it. My collection's still going to be valuable. It's not going to stay like this forever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And that statement is really important. But the other thing it does is it gets out in front of the community and gives the community, again, a kind of shared sense of what the developers want the game to be, which is actually quite important because a lot of this sort of rules argument stuff or like just player argument stuff in a mature game's life comes down to like, one of the arguments you see a lot is like, well, this is the way the game is. If you don't like it, don't play it, which I get. But at the same time, you kind of want to be able to dream of a better way, right? When X-Wing was just people being shot with harpoon missiles and bombs and turrets. And it's like, I feel like we've lost something because neither X-Wings nor TIE fighters are viable in this game called X-Wing. You know what I mean? It's sort of, it creates a tension in the community where between people who are still okay playing the game as it is and people who have checked out but desperately want it to change.
Yeah.
And so having the developers just come along and say, guess what? It's going to be this now is good, I think, universally, because it means one way or another, it gives everybody a common sense of what they're investing in.
Just knowing that there can be a new edition as well is very, very useful. So that it felt like the problem, I don't know really, but just listening to you, Chris, like seemed like the problem was that it felt like it was going to like just go on and on and on and just sort of like go gradually into the bin over the course of a decade. And just knowing that there can be a refresh in 5 years if needed. I mean, that's surely a hopeful thing for people who, whenever, something goes wrong.
Yeah, they've given themselves the apparatus to make that change. And I think it's the least, in terms of impact on players, it's probably the least damaging way for them to do it, with releasing these conversion kits with cards for everything in them, that kind of thing. Yeah. Like, that's a big problem they gave themselves, right? Like,
yeah.
If you try and respect all existing printed stuff, then, which Age of Sigmar is trying to do, basically, then you risk not fixing anything at all, because stuff that's broken on those cards will stay broken.
Stay there forever.
But if you throw all that stuff out, then are you throwing away people's collections for them? That's, that's, the old school sort of, Warhammer Fantasy Battle to Age of Sigmar problem. And I think threading this middle line where there are relatively affordable, pretty comprehensive upgrade kits that get you everything is a pretty good solution. The people it hurts, I think, are people with moderate sized collections. Like, I think you're in a tricky position, for example, Don, because you've got some stuff. You've got more than just a core set, but less than like one of everything, which is where I'm at with Rebels and Imperials.
Yeah.
So for me, those Rebel and Imperial, I'm getting maximal value from those conversion kits for Rebels and Imperials, because I have every ship they have cards for. If you decided to pick up a Scum conversion kit, you'll obviously get new stuff for everything you have, but you don't have everything. So you're going to get loads of cards that you don't have the ships for, and so on.
Yeah.
Which is sort of, it becomes a different value call, I think. So it's not perfect.
I think it's, from my perspective, I would happily play any faction. I think all the factions are exciting. But I like the idea of just being able to buy a Scum pack. And I don't mind having the excess cards. I just want to know that my Slave One and my little kind of like robot ships and all the Scum ships I have, the toilet seat, they're going to get new rules and actually be viable again. I'll pay £35 just to make them relevant again so I can play the game again.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned earlier, like this perspective of like, if you don't like it, don't play it. The problem with that is that there's no game like X-Wing. There's no game with
there is Star Trek Attack Wing.
Okay, yeah.
Which is the same game, but broken.
There are very few games with that following in that type of tournament scene and, with that type of atmosphere. And it's like leaving a sort of cool hobby family that you've made. Like, walking away from these games isn't just like, it's not like a computer game where let's put it down and play one of the other million first person shooters out there. It's a whole community and, you bought models and invested and I don't want to kind of like make it okay that players feel entitled a lot, but people should feel a little bit entitled to an ongoing kind of living game service for that type of game.
It's funny, and I think, Warhammer's very similar, and I can understand when people get upset when things change a lot. X-Wing for me was my way into this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be sitting here recording a predominantly Warhammer podcast, honest, if it hadn't been for that game. And it was like the first thing that I did really that helped me make like substantial amounts of friends that weren't colleagues of some kind, right? Like you get to your 30s, it's not easy to make friends that you don't.
Community, yeah.
Like, and so I made, tons of friends in Bristol and sort of that I would never have met otherwise.
Yeah.
And now I feel bad because I've stopped going to X-Wing events really, but when I go simply because I will see people there.
Yeah.
And I don't have a huge amount of fun playing the game. And there's tons of things that go into that. And a lot of my friends that I respect the most as players have stopped playing outright, which means you don't even see them there. So the rule set, I would think becoming substantially less interesting, has a real social consequence for people. Like it's not, what I mean? Yeah. And so, for me, it's like, it's not just great. This game I'm technically interested in is getting overhauled. It's like I'm getting my friends back. It's 2016 again, 2015 again, everybody. Like that's, that's a big deal. And I can, it's just really, really, really super exciting.
Also, we perhaps haven't mentioned the most exciting thing about X-Wing 2.0, which is the new X-Wings can go into attack position.
They can, and the actual miniature has opening,
it moves, and you can go from like X-Wing attack position to. It's just the nerdiest thing ever, Chris, and I fucking love it.
Look, there's, if we did a podcast about pen and paper role playing, I could probably say that, and I run a Star Wars role playing campaign, and it's been going on for just over a year now, and I dish out little important Star Wars quotes as almost like treats, like once a season.
Yeah.
And so we got at the end of the first season that we did, or the first arc, first campaign, took most of the year, I finally kind of like, sort of got to the, like, made them really wait for the things exiting hyperspace moment.
Yeah.
But no one has said yet S4's an attack position. And that's because that's got to be fucking choice when it happens.
It's got to be.
And the fact they're adding that to X-Wing is only a good thing. I mean, to be honest, it's coming to 1.0 in the next expansion. But in a very kind of, it's not core to the game, which I think it will be in 2.0, which is as it should be.
Yeah.
What do X-Wings do?
Yeah.
They go, and then they shoot different.
You shoot 4 times, shoot twice as much. 4 guns now.
It doesn't make any sense.
I know. I love it though. It's so fucking cool.
Yeah. It is just, like, there is really no reason why it would help or not.
It's more accurate when you've got 2 guns, but more cool.
Well, it doesn't even change the number of guns. It changes the firing pattern.
Right. Oh, so they all fall, say,
they fire at a convergent point.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So,
like a scatter.
Make it more accurate. They're faster when they're closed. Why?
Because that's how air resistance,
well, this is the thing about Star Wars. Star Wars makes sense if everything is very, very, very small and it's all happening underwater. Like, this is completely off topic, but go see Solo with that in mind. And you're like, this does make sense.
I need to see that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. We should get off Star Wars, but like, I'm super excited about that. And it will, like, maybe one of the reasons that, Minis Monthly has been predominantly the Age of Sigmar thing is because the beginning of this podcast, 16 months ago, which is nuts, coincided with the beginning of my waning X-Wing enthusiasm.
Yeah.
But now I'm
back in.
I'm very excited.
I'm excited too.
Very excited. The other thing I'm extremely excited about, and I feel like I'm teasing now with Age of Sigmar 2.0, but I do want to talk about this briefly, is Adeptus Titanicus.
Yeah.
Because this was announced at Warhammer Fest alongside Age of Sigmar 2.0. And I feel the same way about it now as I felt about Shadespire this time last year. It's that thing I can't stop thinking about that I really, 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 really want. I don't know if you got that from it at all.
Not with Titanicus at all, until I saw the adorable mini knight. Which is about the size of a Kernoth Hunter, which is about, 3 inches tall by the looks of it, like 3 or 4 inches.
I think they're closer to Stormcast size.
Oh, okay, so they're actually
because they're on 40mm bases.
Okay. But it was adorable and I immediately wanted to paint it. And knights are the coolest thing in 40k, pretty much.
Yes, they are. Yeah,
it's got to be said. So Titanicus sounds awesome. And also they just announced a Renegade as well, which is the new Knight versus Knight box set they're bringing back, which if you want some cheap knights, apparently that's the way to do it.
Yeah, that's to go along with the Knights Codex, which is coming out for 40k.
Yeah. But yeah, Titanicus is a different proposition, isn't it?
So this is 8mm scale Titan on Titan action.
Horus Heresy era, isn't it?
At first.
So
it means Warlord Titans, which are those child-sized robots we were talking about a couple of months ago. But rather than spending thousands of pounds for a child-sized robot, you pay some amount of pounds for one that'll be about the same size as an Imperial Knight, I think. Because 8mm scale means that basically, it's basically like 10 centimeters is about 150 feet. So you're talking city blocks and, and indeed that's the terrain they're putting out, the plastic terrain, like Horus Heresy era Imperial world buildings and stuff. It looks super cool.
Yeah, it looks really, really cool. Love the idea of, a Battletech style granular mech combat game. But with Games Workshop's awesome giant robots.
So rumor is that it's out in August. My birthday's in August. And so they're saying it's going to be expensive. They are saying it's going to be expensive, which is
damn.
And it fits into that sort of half Forge World, half GW.
I think that's what it's going to be, isn't it?
Thing like Necromunda, where it'll be like plastic models from Games Workshop plus Forge World resin add-on bits. But the big and the rules and the models come separately, which is interesting. But the big box they're doing includes I think it's 2 Warlord Titans.
Oh wow.
And 6 Knights.
Wow, that's way more than I thought they'd put in.
Which is I think 2 factions. I think that's you're supposed to do 1 and 1, but actually I would probably just do them all the same. I really want to paint them. That's the thing. I wanted to paint Knights, but I don't have an Imperial army in 40k for Knights to plug into, really. And it's quite a big investment. Obviously, it's all a big investment. Painting a Titan at the scale of a Knight is almost perfect for that. Want it real bad. And there's, I bought, Horus Heresy Book 7, in a big, hardback, mega tome, last year during my Thousand Suns Mania, and I haven't really used any part of it, but there's a description of, it devotes maybe 6-7 pages to its description of a kind of lesser known Titan Legion that was based on Prospero during the burning of Prospero. And it's the Titans that happen to fight in the burning of Prospero. And it's literally there for the type of in pretty deep Forge World hobbyist who's like, well, I have 8,000 points of resin, Thousand Suns. I really need to add a Titan to this, but what color are those Titans? If only a big book that cost £80 would come along and tell me what color to paint my £1,000 child-sized robot. And the answer is purple. And so, like, that information, like, it's lavish lore and it's connected to a Mechanicum Forge World that I really like the story of. And, really, detailed, background writing by the late Alan Bligh, who's doing all of this stuff. And, like, it's a fantastic bit of supporting material for a part of that hobby that I would never otherwise interact with, right? I'm never going to get a Titan otherwise. No. But suddenly, this game might be an opportunity to just do that. Like, I'll make that Titan Legion as an Adeptus Titanicus project, fantastic. Which, it's just basically purple mechs is what I'm going to be painting.
Yeah, that sounds great. That sounds great.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
I'd love to see their Warlord Titan, their night-sized Warlord Titan models. I'd love to. Have they teased them at all?
They've shown them.
Oh, excellent.
I think I'm thinking is right. It's Warlord, and then the smaller ones are Reapers and Warhounds. Because Reapers and Warhounds are coming. Warlords are the big ones, I believe. They've shown the biggest end of the spectrum and the smallest end of the spectrum. They've shown the Knights and the Titans. The big boys.
Excellent.
But yeah, so like the scale is basically like a Knight is about the same size as a Stormcaster or a Primaris Space Marine. And Warlord Titan is about the same size as a current Imperial Knight.
Oh, rad. That's badass.
So like that's the scale they're working with. It's dead exciting. Like I know it's a totally kind of frivolous thing to get into a new game system, but I'm like, really, like,
yeah, that's super cool.
I don't even really like, I think I just want to build the models and do the dioramas and build the terrain more than I want to play it, although it sounds really cool. It's like, my interest is first and foremost, like, maybe it's being into loving mech warrior as well. There's that element of like, just, scale as well.
Yeah.
Like big stuff.
I love the idea of them putting out these kind of plastic cityscapes as well, which seems to be like integral to it actually. Like,
yeah, that core box comes with 2 boxes of them, I think, as well.
Oh yeah.
Like,
God, that's going to be.
What I think I'll do is I'll get that core box one way or another, I think, and then, provided it doesn't sell out or anything, and then we can play it with just using that set.
Yeah, rad.
See how we feel
That'd
about
be amazing.
Yeah.
It'd be a lot of fun.
Very, very excited. Should we talk about Age of Sigmar 2nd edition?
It's the big news, isn't it?
It is. So, yeah, so as if, good things coming in 2nd editions for both games in 1 month. Both games that I care about. There's so much to talk about. I don't really know where to start. We could get into rules, or we could talk about the new setup. So
there's a new box that says the new box is going to be a new chamber of Stormcast Eternals, which obviously I'm delighted about.
Yep. Sacrosanct chamber.
Sacrosanct chamber. Stormcast is going to be getting some wizards. You're going to be getting some cloaks, which is the sort of thing I was thinking about green stuffing the Lore Hunter's Vizier.
I was going to mention
like
this.
Like if I was going to like design a Stormcast chamber to represent the Lore Hunter's Vizier, they would look exactly like
what they've described this to me. I think it was the first time we ever played a game of Age of Sigmar together. You said that what you would like maybe to do one day is Liberators that had like cloaks or hoods or robes.
Yeah.
A bit like Dark Angels. Like that's how I was imagining them in my head.
Right. Yeah, that's how I always thought about it.
And here we are.
And it's exactly, and they look fucking amazing. The models are great. I'm so excited about the new Stormcast chamber. I know that it's the old Space Marine thing where, of course, the Stormcaster are always going to get more models than everyone else because it's the kind of, they're the kind of poster faction of Age of Sigmar. But you should collect some because then you're always going to be well served. But I'm really excited because it means that I get to have a magic phase now as well.
Yeah, I'm excited about that.
Which means I actually get to interact with like Tzeentch a bit more, and it just gives the Stormcast a bit more variety and it makes the new battle line units particularly look more interesting than just Liberators and stuff. So I'm really excited about having more variety in my already very well served army. But yeah, that's awesome. But it's not just them. The new big bad is the Nighthaunt. Nagash's rabid ghost forces are now the Stormcast's sort of main target. So there's all this, the malign portents have happened. All these spirits have been unleashed from Nagash's dungeon. Nagash is on the warpath. He's going to take Sigmar on head on in this war of souls. And so the new box is going to be his Night Haunt ghosties fighting, magical Stormcast wizards. And the new Night Haunt models, really sweet. I really like them a lot, and I can't wait to paint them up. They're really, really nice. So that's sort of the reset. That's the new box, and this is what Malign Portents has been leading up to. And I mean, I was complaining a few months back about there being no new death models, even though Legions of Nagash is a good book, and now it sort of all makes sense now. Like all the Malign Portents, everything they've done, teasing since last Christmas, like it all makes sense now with the new direction they're going to go in. And this is going to coincide with a rules update that seems more subtle than a total overhaul, but nonetheless very important in the significant changes it makes. Yeah. And I guess we should get into some of the new systems.
Yeah, we should do, because I guess it all loops back, because, I mean, I think I said, like, last month or a couple of months ago that I'd be surprised if Stormcast didn't get wizards, because we were all expecting Magic to get an overhaul. For sure, yeah. And so, you know, because the poster faction gets to play with the toys, basically. Yeah. So, I guess, I really want to get into like some of the more granular changes, but I think the flagship change is Magic in terms of what's going on with it. And this is actually kind of amazing news for both of us, because I have a Zine Charmy, and the Zine Charmy relies very heavily on Magic, but Magic can feel like a kind of one-sided and not particularly interactive system, something I want to get onto and talk about the games I played recently. I actually don't feel that Magic in its current Age of Sigmar is really any different in terms of its damage output than a lot of other special things units can do in different phases, right? There are units that are extremely dangerous in shooting. There are units that are extremely dangerous in the combat phase. The difference with Magic has always been that it's slightly one-sided unless both armies are completely loaded up with wizards. And unless basically it's two Zine Charmies, in which case, they're constantly unbinding each other and doing crazy things. But actually very few other armies interact with it in the same way. Yeah. And that's changing in two ways. One, the flagship one being, what are called endless spells. So this is what we saw a couple of months ago when we saw that spooky purple coughing, Pokemon. It was actually the purple moon of Shaiish, or Xerius, as it used to be called. And so these are spells that summon a model, a spell model. Like we've seen a big mouth, we've seen lightning balls and the spooky moon, like a crystal wall barricade thing. Yeah. The Balewind Vortex is reportedly becoming one of these and losing its existing rules, which is very good.
Completely rewritten, which is great for the game, I would say.
It's very good for the game. And these are really interesting because, so they do stuff when they touch units, basically. So the example is the big ball that flies around and kills things, basically. But what that means, in practical terms is, you know, you cast it, you get to move it around. Enemy wizards can try and get rid of it by unbinding it, but both players get to move it on their turns. Yeah. Even if you have no wizards, which is really nice because it'll mean that when these spells are in play, dealing with them becomes a kind of game of ping pong that's happening in addition to the game of Age of Sigmar you're otherwise playing.
Yeah, it's very true for double turns as well, when you can get a double move with a big mortal wound spell or something like that and put it back into the enemy's ranks. It's very interesting.
Yeah, precisely, because it's, you know, it's on your, like, you know, and this is what's so cool about it for me is it puts those spells under the control of both players, which is a really cool additional layer to the game. It gives them a reason to be spells rather than like a summoned unit that runs around or something.
And they can be dispelled as well and stuff, which is important.
Dispelling radius is being boosted to a flat 30 inches for everybody, which is massive. Yeah. It's 18 inches at the moment, and like I think Zinch has access to a command ability that extends it to 27, so that'll have to change because otherwise that's just a dead bit of rule. But that's a really big deal because it means that there's more counterplay for Magic, because 18 inches is really short range.
It is. Yeah.
And, you know, that's pretty much close to comfortable charge range for most forms of cavalry. Yeah. It means that your wizards are always putting themselves in quite extreme danger in order to counter your opponent's wizards.
Not just to do the basic thing a wizard should be able to do as well. Like, it should be a thing they should be, most of the time be able to do if they're in a vaguely sensible position. It's such an obvious and good change, and I'm really happy about that.
Yeah. And it also comes with like quite a lot of changes to, so tons of new spells by the looks of things. Yeah. That are realm specific. It feels like realms are becoming quite a big feature of the game. Yeah. We haven't seen a lot about that yet, but it's interesting.
Yeah. I'd really be really interested to see to what extent this is confined to narrative play or match play. But it seems like such a big deal that it might actually become part of match play. You might have to declare a realm before a battle starts or something like that. We'll have to see.
Yeah, so there's those more like generic artifacts that can be taken if you're in a specific realm, that kind of thing. This I find really interesting because, so Malign Portents introduced lots of interesting new rules, like the cards and the portent system and things like that. You and I played with it once.
Yeah.
I really like that system.
Yeah.
But I don't think it ever saw play at a tournament. And that's not to say that tournament play, I think there's a temptation to see matched play or tournament play as the only way of playing that matters. And I don't think that's true.
No.
And I don't want to only play like that. However, I really want something like a realm system to be adopted by events and to become core to the game. But I haven't seen enough yet, but there's a narrow, tightrope that needs to be walked here. Because if it's too unimpactful, then obviously it's not, then it doesn't do anything for the game. If it's too complicated to implement, or too one-sided, or too swingy, to be left to a dice roll, for example, then people just will cut the system out. And all games will take place in the realm of normal, where nothing swings one way or the other.
Yeah.
I feel like that's, I really want to see them get it right, because I'd like to see that level of interest happen. And I'd like to see players planning for how to play in different realms, for example, where different spells are going to be in effect. But it is a potential force multiplier in terms of how complicated the game gets as well.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, you could sort of see tournaments going, round 1 is Realm of Fire and it's this scenario. Round 2 is Realm of Death and it's this scenario. And then, but then, by the sounds of it, one of the death spells got significantly more powerful for being in the Realm of Death. So it's almost like an arbitrary bump for a particular faction in that. So, well, we don't know enough quite to really get into it.
The spells they've revealed that are affected by the realms are the ones that are available to everybody.
Yeah, okay.
So the Purple Moon, which is the big mortal wound spell, anyone can do it.
If you're in that realm.
If you're in the Realm of Death, it moves faster. For everybody.
Right. Okay.
The other one they showed, which is crazy good for me. This spell is nuts.
Is this the mirror one?
The mirror.
Yeah.
So it's the Realm of Shadows spell, which is Mirror of Shadows, probably. And what that does is you place a mirror within 9 inches of the caster or something like that. And then the other mirror within 18 inches of that first mirror. And then when the caster casts a spell, you can cast whatever they're casting at the first mirror and then measure distance for its effect from the other mirror. This is massive for Tzeentch because range is my biggest issue, right? Deadly magic, 18-inch bubble for a lot of it. It's the reason the Balewind, which doubles my spell range in its current iteration, is so important useful for that army because, it's a squishy army and 18 inches is dead range for a lot of things. So, that's an important thing. If that game is taking place in the Realm of Shadows, you can place the second mirror anywhere you want,
right,
which basically suddenly means you have a way of deep striking magic. It means, I love this idea. I think it's super themey. I like the idea that this mirror appears and Lord of Change starts just sucking people into space through it. You know what I mean? That's on the other side of the map, like a kind of bizarre deep striking where it's just the magic that reaches through. That's super neat. There's already a Tzeentch battalion that sort of does this, and then they nerfed it. Because it allowed Lords of Change to project their magic through any group of flamers, which I quite liked as an idea, because flamers are underused anyway, so might as well give them a thing they do. But yeah, I love that stuff. And this idea that they get more powerful than the realms is, interesting because it backfires potentially for everybody. And the other thing about those mirrors is they work both ways. So if I put a mirror in your back line, you have wizards, you can then start throwing spells through it back the other way.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So,
or dispel it. I mean, this is always the thing for me. As long as there's a counter to it.
Yeah.
These things obviously can be exploited, but, it's amazing. The changes they've made have such massive repercussions for how the game's going to be played. It's going to become a different game, even though they don't have to rewrite loads of war scrolls, but just the things that they've already talked about are going to be absolutely huge.
Yeah, so I'm super excited about that because I think it will genuinely make our games more exciting. I'm interested to see how they end up selling the models for those spells.
Yeah.
Because this is another thing. If it's a separate expansion that everyone kind of has to buy to participate in the magic system, then I just don't know how that's going to work. But equally, I don't want it to be in the new core set because I'm quite happy that I don't want anything in the core set apart from the book.
No, yeah. I can almost imagine them doing a big box of magic spells that's 40, 50 quid or whatever, and you get loads of them, and then selling them individually as blister packs if you happen to be running orcs and you want the sort of Nashi bone teeth thing, and then, pay 15 quid for that or whatever. Yeah. I mean, I really like the models. I love the idea of models being magic being represented in models on the tabletop, and some of them sound super cool. So there's one that's each, I think, well, anyone could do it, I guess, but this sounds like a Zinch one, like called Cogs of Time.
This is crazy.
Yeah, which is nuts. And basically a wizard summons this and then sort of administers it, and it can be dispelled as well, but as long as it's on the battlefield, the wizard can channel it one way or the other, and it can either slow down time or speed up time. And speeding up time means everything moves and charges faster. Everything. Not just your army, but everything in your enemy's army also does as well, which might suit you in certain circumstances. But you can also slow down time and cast extra spells as well, depending on which way your wizard wants to do that.
Yeah. I like the idea of like speeding up time when you're facing a gun line. And
right.
They don't want to move. And suddenly
you want to get your Zangor running faster.
Yeah.
And you speed up time here.
Because of the Cogs of Time thing, I wonder if that's one of the Realm of Metal spells. Because that's, potentially good for me with my Realm of Metal themed Zinch army and my Realm of Metal themed board and my...
These models are going to be awesome. Like the ones they've teased already, just in little screenshots in the Warhammer community site, look super, super cool. Yeah. They're going to be a challenge to paint as well if you've got to learn how to paint energy effects.
Yeah, thank God I've been doing that for a long time.
Some green fire. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they'll also be kind of forgiving to paint as well. This is true. So, I think it'll be possible to do a nice job. They kind of remind me of the new Nighthaunt in that way. Like they're putting out new technical paints that are basically just like ghost in a pot.
Just dip it.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure, yeah.
Very dippable ghost. But I think most of the new spells you'd get away with spray it white, put a glaze over it, you're done now.
Yeah. Sure,
that's probably fine. But equally you can do more with them, I think. Like, I think there's loads of potential for like, as long as you get the right base size, doing like custom versions for your army, like that kind of thing.
That's a cool idea.
I think Purple Sun kind of describes what it needs to look like quite a bit, but like for other things, like the potential to do cool, different takes on what that particular spell looks like for you is super neat.
That's super nice.
Like this is what I wanted to do in my Lord of Change's base. Like he's ripping that hole in space-time in his base because that's his spell. And I kind of wanted, like, I've tried so many different things to make my nonsense hero phase fun for the other player. But one of them was like, it's fun if you visualize it, right? Like, I played against quite a few competitive Age of Sigmar players recently, and I kind of want to know, when I'm playing against an army I haven't seen before, I want to know what the spell's called, and I want to know what it technically does, because the rules always go into quite a lot of like evocative detail about how the spell works.
Yeah.
But people sort of skip past that to the pick a unit and D6 mortal wounds or whatever it is, right? Yeah. But I always want to like emphasize like, so my Lord of Change tends to cast Gateway followed by Zinch's Firestorm. So first thing is not, they both do mortal wounds, but the first one is like ripping holes to the realm of chaos and chucking people through them, and the second one is setting people on fire. And that distinction is important to me because I think I want you to be able to visualize it, right? Yeah. I want to know what happened to the dude that got sent through a big space hole or whatever.
Yeah.
So having the models, you're right, makes that way realer.
It's going to be an interesting. So I still don't know what happens if one of those models ends up in the middle of a unit.
Yeah.
And that's not quite clear. It's like a template effect, basically, that moves over units, and anything it comes into contact with, it tends to do mortal wounds. That seems to be a theme for a certain type of endless spell or predatory spell or whatever it is they're calling them. And yeah, I don't know, like, where do you balance that? If it's just in the middle of a big unit as angle, like, does it stay there? Does it push people away?
Does it move straight to the other side of the unit, which would probably be the way to do it?
So, yeah.
Like, if it connects to the unit, you just keep going in a straight line to get to the other side, maybe?
I know. So there's a lot of this kind of rules, lawyery stuff to be revealed.
Also, from a fiction point of view, did you read the thing about why they're endless now?
So it's because magic's out of control.
Nagash changed something, and now magic can't die.
Right.
So wizards have to go out as bounty hunters to stop rogue spells.
Yeah, that's right. That
won't stop going, which is like...
Yeah, apparently there's something called like the Slayer Sword that just goes across one of the realms, and it's just fated. It's just like a legendary thing that just comes and kills stuff.
Yeah,
there's all these wizards hunting it down, trying to stop it. It's like a runaway train. It's like
and then the wizard who originally cast it chasing after it going, sorry! Or like that, that like... The Fenton dog guy, like chasing his Labrador off to like, oh, for God's sake,
Christ,
Jesus Christ,
stop,
Fenton, gnashing more. Basically that. Also, I want to say, with Stormcast getting wizards, where the fuck is Balthazar Gelt?
Oh yeah,
think about it. Imperial Sigmar sort of flavored hero wizard that looks the most like a Stormcast of anybody in the old world. where the fuck has he gone? I appreciate he probably felt quite guilty, or Balthazar guilty, after making a bad wall. I can't remember exactly what happened during the end times.
Yeah.
I think he did a bad wall. But nonetheless, right, this felt like really did feel like the time.
Maybe Sigmar did not consider him worthy.
No, maybe not.
And instead, decided to choose men with handlebar moustaches exclusively for his new army of, war machine administrators.
Well, you say that, but one thing that's really cool about Stormcast range we didn't mention is the much better male-female ratio of everything in that range.
Yeah, definitely. In fact, the only exception is the crew for the new ballista.
And the Lord, I think. There's two types of new hero. I wrote it down, Knight Incantor. And I think they have shown both male and female versions of that character, but there's also the Lord Arcanum.
Okay. Is this the one
he's on a
thing?
Hippogriff. Chocobo.
Chocobo, yeah.
The thing you just painted.
Griff Char? No, that's not Griff Charger.
Ether Strike Chicken.
Bird. It's
boy.
Horse. Let's just call it a horse.
Yeah, exactly. Horse.
A horse. The thing on a horse.
Yeah, so we need like a symbol, like Prince had, but it means horse.
Artist.
But
formerly known as
beast.
horse.
Yeah, quadrupedal conveyance creature.
I have a theory, based on the new Ninetaunt models, that the reason there are no horses in Age of Sigmar is because Nagash, Lord of the Undead, has been hoarding all the horse souls, and only the undead are allowed to ride horses, because the sort of general of the Nighthaunt has a big old spooky, an enormous horse.
Yeah.
Just a really big horse, like about 5 horse souls worth of horse in one creature. So I think that's what's happened here. So the Stormcast would ride horses, but Nagash
all the horse souls.
He's got the horse.
How do you explain Chaos Knights?
Maybe the few corn, maybe for corn there's a few horses. Horses can go corn, I think.
Yeah. Horses for corn says? No, it doesn't work. That's nothing at all.
Close.
Okay. The Varangard, they're on spooky horses.
Yeah, I would hesitate. Like, I wouldn't call a Griff Charger a horse. No. And I wouldn't call a Varangard thing a horse. It's just a kind of horrifying construct that...
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
Construct.
Yeah, you're right. I think maybe what you do is you just agree to call them all horses.
I
think this is like the end of that argument.
Yeah,
you just call it a horse.
It's a horse.
Just look your opponent dead in the eye and say, that's a horse.
It's time to
roll
roll
what you're talking
the
about.
horse's attacks.
Exactly.
Just stare
dead
in the eye.
Can we make a commitment to this to now and here and now? Yeah. From now on, it's the horse.
The horse.
Yeah.
Is making the attacks. Yes, it has a beak. What?
Yeah, if I ever do Archaon, that's a horse. And technically that even is a horse. Because Dorgar
was a horse.
He
became a chaos demon and started eating
He ate
souls,
3
right?
greater demons.
That's impressive for a horse.
That
horse has gone
far. He ate
far.
a bloodthirster, he ate a great and clean one, and he ate a Lord of Change.
What a hungry horse.
He is a hungry horse. This is because each of the 3 Chaos Gods all sent a champion to slay Archaon, and his horse ate all of them.
They didn't get past the first mini boss.
Exactly. And for each horse he eats, he gains a head.
That explains a lot.
Yeah, he eats a lot of people. He ate a Stormcast as well at one point. But
that's the reason.
Yeah. Yes, that is nonsense, is the answer there. When you finish your Star Horse, Star Drake horse, do we call that a horse as well?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
It's just a very large flying horse. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Good. What were we talking about? It's really good that they've got mixed gender Stormcast units.
Yes, that's excellent. It's really, really cool. And actually, I think the solution they've gone with, largely is to make the Stormcast armor a bit more androgynous, and it's quite almost like hard to tell with the battle line. There are slight differences, but for the most part, they're all just like armored warriors, and there are just slight changes that you might imply means this is a female Stormcast or a male.
It's very sonorous.
Yeah, just like punched a glass of water there. That was nice.
But it made a beautiful sound. Yeah, and there are like female banshees, I think, in the Nighthaunt army, but also they're fucking ghosts. They're just bin bags over a sword.
Yeah.
They can be anything, right? They can be anything. So like, yeah, and the I think between this and the Idneth last month or whenever, this is the trend moving in the right direction.
Definitely,
like absolutely moving in the right direction, particularly after the sort of iffy Daughters of Cain thing, which is sort of, like, it can't stop there, right? Like, that's what we were saying at the time, is it has to move on to like, female characters in every part of the game, not just in this army of elves with no clothes on. And that's, it's super good. Like,
nice.
Hopefully it will just keep getting more like this, basically. That'd be nice.
Hopefully, yeah. It's really nicely done. I'm really, like, they've avoided a lot of pitfalls with, that type of design as well. Like, the Stormcast are a big sort of automata, really, and they've just simply applied that. They haven't really changed anything about that to make female Stormcast. They fit right in. It's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, yes. Also, they did add, I think they're called Castigators, which are the new ranged unit that have a crossbow that fire maces.
Oh yeah.
So there's not a lot of time to pause on the actual individual details of who this model is, because the weapons are ridiculous now.
Yeah. So these maces have, a crystal full of not Star Drake. Dracos breath.
Horse breath.
Horse breath. Yeah, they've got maces full of horse breath that they shoot at enemies now, and which are kind of like a ranged concussion, thing.
They're grenade launchers.
They're grenade launchers, yeah. Fantasy grenade launchers. Powered by horses.
We should talk about some of the other rule changes, because there's actually quite a lot more.
Yeah,
so I was really glad to not see the double turn go. Mm-hmm. I think it's a very important Age of Sigmar thing. I think it's something that new players often find a bit like, whoa, what the fuck? You just get to go twice.
Right.
But actually it's great. And the change to that, however, is, so they haven't clarified how rolling off of the first turn works. And I really hope they address that for other reasons we'll get to. But in subsequent turn roll-offs, it's a really simple change. Whoever went first last time wins ties.
Yeah.
Which means that you are slightly less likely to get a double turn, basically. Because, I mean, we know we both roll one at the same time quite a lot.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's true.
So basically all it does is make double turns slightly less likely. And there are other things the magic system and the spell system interacts with this as well to make double turns slightly less desirable. So it's just a tweak. It's not like throwing the system out. It makes them slightly less important without taking away the potential impact that they can have, which is super cool.
Yeah, I think they are an important part of the identity of the game. And actually, like, having a regular turn system does create problems in 40k and stuff, which they struggle with, and AOS doesn't in the same way. And it's just a part of the game that you learn to play around. I think it is odd still, but I think it's an important part of what AOS is. So I'm glad to see they didn't throw it out, and I'm glad to see they haven't introduced ways of manipulating turn order explicitly, which was what Kairos used to be able to do for Tzeentch, and it caused all sorts of terrible imbalance problems. It just became ridiculous. If you're able to control that utterly, then that's terrible. So I think it's nice for them to keep it, just slightly adjust it.
Yeah. The other really cool change, which we actually talked about because it was a rumor that was true, which is the addition of command points to Age of Sigmar.
Yeah.
But instead of the 40k system of using them for rerolls, it sounds like you'll have fewer, and they'll be used for more specific things.
Yeah.
So everybody gets one command point per turn. You start the game with an extra one for every War Scroll battalion you take. And my hope is that this is a replacement for War Scroll battalions having anything to do with you going first.
Right.
I really hope they're going to change. Yeah, because I think, that's my hope, but we'll see. And you can also basically, didn't word it this way, but you can functionally spend 50 points to get one. Because you get an extra one for every 50 points you haven't spent out of the cap. Yeah. But that basically means there's a thing that costs 50 points now, which is really useful for a lot of armies because that's an awkward points value. Like, you build a lot of lists where you end up at 940 points or whatever. Definitely. And it's like,
I'll just have a command point.
Yeah. What these allow you to do is, first and foremost, trigger any command ability in your army on any of your characters, which is super cool. It means that there's a lot of heroes, particularly on the sort of Slaves to Darkness Khorne side for me, that have really interesting command abilities that you'd never see because they're not otherwise general material. Yeah. And I think probably the same is true for Stormcast as well. It's probably going to be some interesting characters there.
Yeah, not many of them do have explicit command abilities. There's stuff like the Lord Tellison on foot, who has a good kind of AoE foot infantry buff for people around him, which you can now use, which you couldn't before, which is no one would ever normally take him in an army as a general. Right. So that's a good example. And they're introducing new generic command abilities as well.
Yeah, so there's a revised Inspiring Presence. The revision is basically Inspiring Presence can now be used by any hero, but the radius is smaller for heroes that aren't your general. But it means that as long as there's a hero near one of your units, you can potentially get Inspiring Presence to it, which is important.
I believe that happens in the battleship phase now as well.
Oh, it does, yeah.
So
that's also really important.
It's opportunistic. So as long as your army is organised efficiently, if you've got heroes near units that are in danger, you can say at the start of the battleship phase, I'm choosing to inspire that and protect it from a very bad round of combat. So that's, again, there's lots and lots of stuff in the rules to make heroes more important and to make get heroes closer to surrounding infantry to make them look more like armies and behave more like armies.
Yeah, a big theme is going to be, and this is something that already existed in the Ideneth battle tome. Ideneth have a lot of quite cheap heroes, but they really need to stand next to a unit.
Yeah.
And this feels very similar.
Yeah, for sure.
Like a new standard archetype will be a block of infantry with their hero next to them.
Yeah.
Which is super cool. Looks good. It's a sensible way of arranging an army. So Inspiring Presence has been revised. There's now at the double, which means I think you do it when you make a run move for a unit. Again, triggered off a hero. You pick a unit and you basically guarantee a 6 for that run roll, which is super good for units that can run and charge. I'm very excited about this for Zangor because they have base movement of 6. They can run and charge. It'd be good for things like with Heralders as well. You've got Heralder nearby. You can do that run and charge, then guarantee the 6 on the run. And suddenly you've got Paladins or Liberators proper huffing it. Rather than the Liberator run that you're used to.
Yeah, for sure.
Where they're tired.
5 inches. Oh.
And then there's Forward to Victory, which you can use after you roll a charge to just re-roll a charge, which is, I think it's the only version of just spend a command point for a re-roll, but it's a really important one.
Yeah.
And I think that's, it's the kind of thing, I'm going to re-roll ones into ones. I know I am, but like that's,
it's great for the Prime.
Yeah.
Because when you use it on himself, to hopefully get a charge off when he goes down. No, I've had terrible luck with him. In my experience.
Maybe you notice it more because it's so important for him. Because he's so exposed.
It's so important. Yeah. If he messes that up, it's a waste of 300 and however many points. But these are really cool, command abilities. The questions for me are their relationship with the battalions and how expensive battalions will be and what battalions will look like in the new edition. Because the problem I always have with battalions is that they're very prescriptive. They tend to be, at least the Stormcasts, so expensive that you have to build an entire army around a particular battalion. And if that interacts with the drop system, which you were talking about earlier, Chris, like the idea that if you take a battalion, you get fewer drops and therefore probably get the choice to go first or not, then you also get extra command points, and you also, there's a whole potential problem there. The
Ideneth battle tome sets a precedent for how battalions will work. I think there are far fewer of them, and they're much more modular. So you might have, they're still expensive, but like they're quite targeted, and they're not themed in quite the same way. By which I mean, like a lot of the battalions they were experimenting with maybe a year ago, including the Tzeentch battle tome, are very much like, this is this army from this place. It fights like this, and it must have these things. And that's fine from a kind of storytelling point of view, but actually it's restricted from a storytelling point of view because it sort of locks your army down. The way it works in the Ideneth battle tome is like, for example, there's one that makes your Nomati, which are your kind of line units, more durable in that it allows you to regenerate more of them, there's a particular hero that can like pull the souls out of dead enemies and use them to bring dead Nomati back to life.
Yeah.
That's usually like a D3 roll. All the battalion does is change what would be a D3 roll to 3, which is good, but it's not like mind blowing.
No.
And that battalion's super simple. It's that hero and 2 of each kind of infantry unit.
Yeah,
so it's quite a lot, but it's super simple.
Yeah.
And it's all relevant to what the buff is. So it's like, it's less complicated stuff. It's just the things you need for that buff. And then what's interesting is you have the loads of like specific, they're called enclaves for the Ideneth. There'll be storm hosts for the Stormcast. The color scheme rule, basically. And the way that works is some of them in the Ideneth book change the way the battalions work. So, one of them like raises the cap on a certain type of unit in that particular type of battalion. So by default, the Nomati core one can only take up to 4 units of Reavers, I think, who are the shooty infantry.
Yeah.
With the Briomdar enclave, they can take up to 6. It's a small thing, but it's a way of differentiating that sub-faction in its own little way. And that's super cool because previously those sorts of things were folded into much bigger battalions. Like in the current Stormcast battle tome, like Hammers of Sigmar are represented by like a mega battalion that is super restrictive.
It's like 3,000 points as well.
Yeah, rather than like a tweak to one of the other battalions, which I would rather see, I think.
Yeah, so in the Ideneth book, does it very carefully specify what the colour scheme must be in order to qualify as being this particular faction?
No. And this is a thing, and it's always going to be a thing. Yeah. And there's also, and this is true in 40k as well, there's a thing where like, sorry, excuse me. Like in 40k it says like, if you don't have one of like the first founding chapters for Space Marines, just pick one of the first founding chapter abilities that fits your people, i.e. the one you actually want, basically.
Yeah.
And that's basically the way it works for Ideneth. It says like, you feel free to paint them however you will, in which case pick one that matches how you think your army plays or what its story is.
Yeah. That's for the best.
That is for the best.
Ultimately.
So I think it's going to be, it'll be a case of saying mine is a Hammers of Sigmar army, therefore I'm using this rule. I think it becomes more restrictive, so for example, I think for you, Tom, if there is like a Hammers of Sigmar ability in the new Stormcast book and you don't want it and you want the Celestial Vindicators one, you're probably a bit screwed because your opponent could reasonably expect your army to be Hammers of Sigmar because it looks like Hammers of Sigmar.
Yeah.
You're better off going with a completely custom scheme if you want to be able to change all the time. But actually, I think if you're slightly more sort of the rules in the Ideneth book aren't mind blowing either. One or two of them are very good, but I guess it's always going to be an avenue for potential balance problems and frustration. But yeah,
it's just the problem with character on Overlords where the one particular Sky Fleet was the only one that would be
Ziflin.
Sylphin, I think. Yeah. And that they did like a big kind of drop and shoot thing. And that's all you see in competitive play. And, that is awkward. And it means that all those beautiful, beautiful boats are being painted in the same way because they have to conform with this particular type of Sky Fleet. And, that feels like the point where the rules are inhibiting the hobby rather than giving players the freedom to express themselves.
It's tricky because I really like having my sort of story choices represented in rules to some extent. But I think I'm a very fluffy man at the end of the day and I want fluffy rules for things. I'm not really interested in abusing them, right? Like, I'd love to do an Ideneth army and I think I will. It won't be until my current Shame pile is done.
Yeah.
Probably be towards the end of the year when Battle Force boxes are coming out, that kind of thing. Or maybe even next year when Start Collecting boxes come out. But the reason I got onto that was because I just loved a certain color scheme that I saw on Instagram.
Nice. From
one of the heavy metal team. And it's in the book. It's one of the official ones. It's one of those enclaves. And so I went in the book and I looked at what's their rule. And I was like, oh, okay, that's their rule. I'll figure out what kind of cool army you can build around that rule. And, I have no intention of running any of the other ones, even if some of them are better, because I fell in love with the color scheme first. And then, then it sort of follows from there. But that's because I'm okay with not having the most competitive thing in the world.
Yeah.
I think if you're not okay, if it really does matter, then, the example for them is like the Iron Rack Enclave, which is the Hammers of Sigmar of Ideneth, the Ultramarines of Ideneth, the one that's on the cover of the book. They have an extremely powerful allegiance ability, which is that they extend the Tide of Death rule to their allies.
Yeah.
Which is the one that allows you to suddenly give, other order units, Stormcast, benefit from the High Tide ability and stuff like that, which is potentially massive.
Really amazing.
So that's probably, and also because the ally system is such a kind of, Power Gamers toolbox for that kind of thing, that's probably going to be the Power Gamers color scheme because that is the open-ended, bullshit valve in that army, right? It's the thing where adding anything to any, particularly Stormcast, but any valid ally order faction has the potential to bust something in the Ideneth Deepkin army because of that rule.
Oh god, I'm just thinking about allying in some Fulminators. And
the no fun way is 400 in a 2,000 point game is 400 points worth of Paladin Protectors, which I think is 20 Paladin Protectors.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So they've got the shooting resistance.
Yeah.
And you have to shoot them.
And you have to shoot them because the Ideneth rule.
Yeah.
And so what you do is you put them in front, and then you put the turtle behind that,
right,
which gives them cover permanently.
Yeah.
I think. No, actually it might not because they benefit from Tides of Death, but they get cover on the first round anyway because of
from Tides of Death.
From Tides of Death.
Yeah.
And then after they finish killing that, they then have to kill the tortoise that won't die.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's going to be rough.
It's the death of gunline armies, basically. But it's also no fun whatsoever, and it's clearly gamey. So if you don't, obviously tournaments are tournaments, but like, if you showed up with that in a regular game, then what you doing?
Yeah, you're right. It's letting match play kind of yank the curtains and change your outlook on the game.
Yank the curtains.
I don't know why I said that. That's strange. That's not a thing anyone says.
I'm sorry for calling you on it. I was almost like, yes, that's a phrase. And I was like, no, it's not.
It should be a phrase. Stop yanking
letting
the curtains.
match play yank the curtain. We really have to stop, sometimes you just got to call a horse and stop letting match play yank the curtains.
Good.
Final, actually there's a few small things.
Yeah.
That we haven't talked about yet. Oh no, there's actually got a few.
Shooting.
Shooting. Let's talk about shooting.
Yeah.
So, a topic of much contention. We've talked about it a lot.
In fact, it's amazing how like a lot of the stuff we've talked about has been directly accounted for in the rules changes.
Yeah, and some of even the specific things we've suggested as well, which is like...
Yeah, like a more interactive magic phase was definitely something we said like months ago. And, now here it is. Pretty awesome.
So, shooting changes. There's been a few.
Yeah.
One is the addition of Look Out, Sir, as a rule. Which is that heroes that are not monsters, so fuck you, Lords of Change and Stardrakes, that are within 3 inches of a unit with 3 or more models, i.e. are hugging another unit, are -1 to hit with shooting.
Yeah.
At all times. Which is great. It's really good.
And it's not the 40k rule, and it's something that's more subtle, and it's more about, it will keep those heroes alive an extra turn, basically, it seems like.
Yes, it's big. That -1's deceptively important. Not just in terms of the odds of hitting, but, so for example, Skyfires. Skyfires are a negative experience for a lot of people because they reliably get a +1 to hit buff from the Zangor Shaman that accompanies them. A good example of a hero who currently likes to hug a unit in a thematic way.
Yeah.
With that +1 to hit, their attack ends on a hit roll of a 5, and they just do D3 mortal wounds. And they shoot once. So a unit of 6, average size. So a unit of 6 with a Zangor Shaman is 540 points, 560 points. Quite expensive.
Yeah.
You roll 6 dice, but every 5 or 6 is D3 mortal wounds, which is massive. And particularly for like heroes with 5 or 6 wounds, it's usually hero killingly massive. Which is quite negative for people because also they have a 40-inch threat range. No, like 36 or something.
They move so fast as well.
Yeah, they zip range. And they kill your heroes.
Yeah.
That -1's really important because it means unbuffed Skyfires can't do exploding hits, which is big. And buffed Skyfires are back to doing it on a 6. So of those 6 shots, more will miss, but also on average only 1 will do D3 mortal wounds, if that. So that just puts a little bit of pressure on that unit, and it reins in some stuff that was a problem in the game. Basically, I want to see Skyfires reined in, because I can't want to paint and run Skyfires, but I don't want to feel like a douchebag.
Yeah.
So there's that. So yeah, that's a nice subtle thing. It will keep things like my Heralds alive longer, which I'm really happy about. And because it means like Judicator sniping is less good as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And also I love that them being within 3 inches. That's a super nice way of describing the shape of the army that is going to happen a lot in the new edition, as we mentioned earlier. But heroes leading a couple of units of infantry, that's a super cool thing. Yeah.
It's
nice.
The other big change to shooting, and it's a big change, is that you can, if you are, so this is the thing that was revealed today, what's the best way of explaining it? If you are within 3 inches of an enemy unit, you have to shoot that unit.
Yep.
So basically, if there is an enemy within 3 inches of you, you have to shoot an enemy within 3 inches of you.
Yeah, it's like being in combat, basically.
Yeah. So that's just super good. It means that, I think it means that there isn't, because we talked about this, like whether or not, like in 40k, shooting is switched off by being engaged in combat. That would require such a top-down re-pointing of all of the ranged units in the game that it might not be worth it. I really like this, because this means that, like, I'm coming at it from the point of view of a Tzeentch player, and I'm used to shooting being like a pretty terrifying existential threat to my most important units, my heroes.
Yeah.
But the thing I'm awash in is amazing chaff. I got chaff everywhere. I got demons I can throw at anybody. And so being able to tie up a ranged unit and force its hand in the shooting phase is huge for me. It's much bigger than the -1 to hit for heroes or anything like that.
Yeah.
Because it just allows you to, again, the other thing is, a bit like the magic phase, it makes shooting more interactive. Because obviously you roll saves and stuff with shooting, but the fact that at present, you know, if an artillery crew or an artillery piece gets charged, they can still fire accurately 48 inches away.
Yes.
It doesn't look right. It doesn't feel right. Like, you know, I've said this on the podcast before. It never felt right to me that, like, you know, we'd be in combat fighting with the Judicators, but then the Judicators would also be firing their longbows backwards over their heads at someone 24 inches away, right? Like, like it makes, you know, obviously it made sense in the rules at the time, but like, it's not a good mind's eye thing. And it's also not as strategically interesting as like,
yeah, the thing I like about this the most, actually, even though it is going to make a lot of ranged units a lot less worthwhile, is that it at least encourages armies to come up with flanking strategies or backfield strategies, and think about, if they're going to have artillery, you've got to have a way to get into the backfield to shut that down. And fundamentally anything that makes the game more about maneuvering and kind of making stuff get over around the battlefield and trying to outmaneuver the opponent to do stuff, that for me is where the interest lies. So there's a great reward to getting into your opponent's backfield with a flying unit or a fast moving unit or something like Vanguard Paladors that can go off one board edge and come on another board edge. They suddenly become amazing kind of artillery killers. Yeah. And that's a cool new dimension to the game in a way. And even just useless chaff stuff like Aether Wings. Really small, useless unit that, you know, you don't want to shoot because they're just like, they're not going to do anything, but they could tie up a unit of archers for a turn or two. Yeah. That's massive suddenly, and you've got to think about that. It's going to be very interesting. It's going to change a lot of things, I think, in the game.
Yeah. There's, a really nice, like, I think, you know, it's in some ways a little bit of a buff to Liberators, because it means that they're very good at engaging someone in combat and then stopping that unit from doing anything else for fucking ages.
Yeah.
Because it takes quite a long time to kill. Well, relative, like, you know, to their number of wounds, like they're pretty durable. And so they're going to be good. My concern, I suppose, is that, you know, interesting to see if army composition changes at all. We haven't seen that yet for match play. Yeah. At the moment, there's probably no reason, if you're a serious tournament player, to take Liberators to protect your Judicators rather than allying in a billion skinks. And just putting them in a big line.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's a thing. But that might change.
I really hope there's a unit cohesion rule change in the new edition that stops that type of data chaining, because I think there should be vulnerabilities in an army on the tabletop. I think you shouldn't be able to get 100 skinks and just put them in a big old wiggly line around everything. I think that's dumb and looks really silly and is not how skinks would behave in an army, you know, in that type of context. I love the wholly within wording that has been used for a lot of
that
stuff.
might be the way they do it, actually.
So, I mean, there'll be a few different wording ways of doing it, but, that it's difficult because, like, it can be overly restrictive, but you're right. If it always becomes about, like, protecting your backfield, then everyone's going to take a unit of chaff and just sit them at the back and they're not going to do anything. Yeah.
See, because I use Brimstones for this now.
Yeah.
And I actually quite like the way it looks with Brimstones, because I kind of imagine the Brimstone Horrors as being almost like a ring of fire around the demons. Like, you need to break through this thing. Yeah. And it's not like they're not like, because they are technically living things, but it's not like skinks, which are actually like living creatures with thoughts and feelings and dreams. Like, a Brimstone Horror is just an angry bit of sentient fire. So it's almost, I imagine that this is sort of like
force field,
both advances ahead of the army and trails behind it. Like, you know, it's almost like an environmental effect than a unit.
Yeah.
So I can mind's eye that as a screening thing. But I agree. I think a simple change would just be units having to be within 1 inch of 2 units models from their same unit. Is the way to fix it.
Yeah, and even within 2, I mean, 40k's cohesion is 2 inches rather than 1. But in AOS, but you tend to see smaller units a lot in 40k, but not for most armies. But yeah, sorry. Yeah, that would be good. Yeah, every individual has to be within an inch of 2 other people. Yeah, then you can't string out 40 skinks across the entire board.
No, you have to start ranking them up a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to do because it's a skirmish game and it's supposed to be about kind of organic movement. But the problem with, like, having to screen off your backfield forever, even though that is the way a lot of Age of Sigmar matchups work, especially if you're facing, for example, Stormcast that have loads of stuff in the sky. You've got to keep stuff back. The problem comes where, like, everyone has to take one. You know what I mean? Like, it becomes like a tax. It becomes like a tax on your army. Oh, so you've got to have your chaff unit that sits around you shooting. And they sit there and they don't do anything. They're just there to protect the shooting, and it's boring, potentially.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
I mean, potentially stuff that it'd be interesting to see what happens with the spells, because wild spells potentially have a way of, or ender spells, have a way of interacting with this. Like Spooky Moon don't give a fuck. Spooky Moon goes through your chaff and it's in your back line. Wrecking your dudes. Yeah. Similarly, Spooky Mirror. You know, like, it's like, oh, fine, you're going to sit behind your chaff. I'm going to park my mirror in front of your chaff and just start flinging fire. Both settings on the Space Hoover.
It's really interesting though. I think you're right about the sort of visualization of it in terms of being in combat. So I can buy adjudicators, definitely darting back and notching a magical space bow and shooting a demon in the face.
Yeah.
As part of their combat, because they're trained to do that. I don't mind people being able to shoot into combat, if they're already in that combat. But this does seem like a sensible change. Like,
I can't imagine them darting back from the demon that's in their face and firing accurately at something miles away.
Yeah.
I'm really happy with it. I'm just looking forward to playing with all this stuff.
Yeah, it's going to be really different.
Yeah, like, cause it affects me, cause like, every demon shoots, and like mass shooting is a big deal for Tzeentch. Like lots of horrors, lots of shooting.
That's true. And
I'm used to being able to strategically use that shooting. Like tying up a unit with Brimstone Horrors, for example, but then chucking 40 shots at something nearby. That's going away. It's not a big hit, because those aren't like, often those shots are best used to just make that combat last longer by getting a few extra kills and slowing them down a bit. But like,
it's not like the point of that unit. It's going to really affect stuff like Vanguard Raptors with long strike crossbows.
Yeah.
So is it, I think they're like 180 points, something like that. So they're not like a cheap unit, but they're not too expensive. But a lot of their points value is tied up in their hero killing ability, and that's going to go down a lot.
So I see what you mean, but I would say something that you might be underestimating is what the value is of having so much hero killing ability in a unit with such a small footprint that can be relatively easily hidden.
Right.
So, like, I'll put it this way. The thing that's really hurts, and I'm really glad to see it hurt, is Savage Orc Arrow Boys, or like Cunning Ruck, where the trick is run 30 of these things, and they've got 2 wounds each, and 60 wounds, and they do 90 shots, and they shoot twice. So 180 shots of face from a massive block of dudes. That unit has a huge footprint on the battlefield. Like, that's a lot of models, and they're on 32mm bases. Like, you're talking about like a good, you know, a certain chunk of the board space is taken up at any time. And if you can get a single fast model into contact with any part of it, you shut them down.
Yeah.
Long strikes are pretty tiny by comparison, and you know, the relative to the amount of power they put out, or have potential to put out. So I think there's something to be said for that. Like, it's, you can put them in places where it's harder to reach them. Yeah. You're not going to be like physically constrained by the fact that like, I can't fit all these orcs behind this wall or something, right? Like, you can make them hard to charge.
It's going to be interesting. The Ether Wings could screen them as well, actually. So you might actually make those.
And easier to screen. There's less space to screen. You don't need 40 skinks to cover them. You can do it with
it's going to be so interesting. And I think these, for example, stuff like long strikes, so they each get 1 shot, and it's like 2+3+. But for heroes now it's 3+3+, and the odds on 3 shots going in 3+3+ is very, very different. Like, it's a very different level of effectiveness. So it's going to be interesting just to play it and sort of see how it pans out, really. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it might be. But also you're kind of incentivized, I suppose, to set things up. So maybe you have, you know, your adjudicators shoot at whatever unit is screening that hero and whittle it down or kill it. You know what I mean? Like, you've got those options. You know, you have incentive to play around that disadvantage to give them the good shot.
I'm not saying this, but I was just thinking about how it's going to change the sort of how these units are going to be viewed and evaluated.
I totally agree. Like, I'm just saying, like, it's all quite crunchy kind of tactical stuff.
I agree. I do.
It's not just this is bad now, right? Yeah. Like, it's like you have to work to make it good.
It'll take a bunch of stuff out of the game, without a doubt. I'm slightly worried about the introduction of artillery for Stormcast, actually, because artillery for me have always been scatter dice are fun and stuff like that. I can't see them doing that in Age of Sigmar because it's a much simpler game and it's less about templates and that kind of thing. Apart from the end of the spell that they've just introduced. But like artillery, they tend to just be hit stuff from miles away and just do mortal wounds. Like that tends to be how artillery does. I really hope that they come up with something a bit more interesting for, cause I could see a kind of artillery meta where you have to shut down the artillery all the time. So you know, otherwise the artillery obliterates stuff.
Yeah.
Which kind of is themey and like is sort of how artillery works a lot of the time, but I don't know. We'll see.
I think it's good that the big moon can eat the artillery.
Maybe that's it. It's the counter.
Yeah, exactly. But have you considered the spooky moon? Like that's like, that's my answer to every question you got about the spooky moon.
The spooky moon could do it.
Spooky moon is not a horse because no one's riding it.
Not yet. So do that every time. See that conversion.
So other massive thing we haven't talked about.
Yeah.
Summoning is free now for everybody.
Oh yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. So something we've noticed across the board in these changes is points values are going down for a lot of things. A lot of things are getting cheap, but I suspect there'll be more models on the board in Age of Sigmar in the future. I'm quite happy because I've got quite a lot more than I need, which is for Tzeentch. So I have more summoning pool stuff. I'll get onto this when I talk about London GT, but I love summoning actually as a thing. I really like reactive summoning. And, so what's changing is reinforcement points are apparently just going away.
Yeah.
And instead every army will have its own way of doing some kind of summoning. So this already exists for Khorne and Nurgle. Tzeentch will presumably get something, and the Slaanesh one is super cool. Have you seen the Slaanesh one?
Yeah, so
they get basically like Slaanesh points, edging it points, basically, for dealing like one wound to a hero at a time. So every time you like deal just one wound to somebody without killing them, you get a point. Wow. And you can use that to summon demons for free.
Stretching out that pain.
Because you're making it last, which is the opposite of Khorne. That gets stuff when...
I was going to say, I thought I got it mixed up with, cause Khorne presumably it's going to be tied to blood tithe points and stuff like that.
I mean, that already works. That's how it already works, right? It's like, if you ever get to 8, this is the thing, as a Khorne player, you should probably have a Bloodthirster, because if you ever get to 8 blood tithe points, that's a Bloodthirster.
Yeah.
Like,
but that's, what an awesome threat that is in a game. Yeah. Like if 8 things die, there's a Bloodthirster on the table. That's awesome. So obviously this will make horrors fucking nuts. Yeah. Because if the horrors splitting rule stays the same, it's just that every unit of pink horrors is also a bajillion blue and brimstone horrors, by the way. I'd be interested to see if that changes. Yeah.
Because they've struggled to balance that from the beginning of the game.
Yeah.
I'd love to see how it works otherwise, because I think what I'd like to see for Tzeentch is something like every time a spell is successfully unbound by anybody, it goes into the pot. Because I quite like that idea, like the more wizards on the table, the more, because all the Chaos God ones are a kind of perfect example of this, because they're all based around do the thing that makes that god more powerful. Because all the Chaos Gods work like this, right? Like the more martial prowess is on the battlefield, the stronger Khorne gets in abstract. Khorne benefits from all war, just like Nurgle benefits from all sickness, and Tzeentch benefits from all magic. Like, I'd like to get in a situation where like the more magic is on the table, like enemy wizards have to be very careful, because if they push it too far, the Tzeentch bucket tips over and then suddenly there are horrors everywhere.
Demons forever.
Which is very Warhammer. That's how it should feel playing it. And I'm really excited to do this, I think, specifically for Chaos, because I want Chaos to feel like this. You've got to counter them, not philosophically, but you've got to not play into their strengths philosophically while also beating them in order to win. Obviously with adjustments and things to make it fair, but like that'd be the feeling I would want.
Yeah, that's the idea of like a sort of boss encounter waiting to happen, where if you overstep, then that goes wrong. I really like that this is going to buff Sylvaneth a little bit, because Sylvaneth have sort of kind of struggled for being one of the earlier battle tomes, and there's a sort of power creep has happened across Age of Sigmar 1.0's lifetime, which means that very early battle tomes didn't quite have everything that subsequent battle tomes had, and General's Handbook fixed that to an extent, but the actual kind of pointing of the units themselves kind of never quite... it's a really good army, and it's really flexible, and it's really kind of elite, but you don't see it like ranking very highly at all. But now Alarielle can summon Kurnoth Hunters and stuff with her new kind of once again spell.
She just plants them.
She just grows them out of the earth and then you're boned. And that's really cool. And also, summoning is potentially really cool. I think the thing that protects the game is the 9 inches away thing. So, the vast majority of summoning or kind of, setting up spells means that stuff gets summoned at least 9 inches away from the nearest enemy unit. And that means loads more screening off, having loads more bodies on the battlefield is going to be more important for stopping summoning from happening, especially undead summoning, which is potentially insane unless you shut it down.
Yeah.
With
Kill
Legions of
heroes.
Nagash.
Yeah.
Which again is very themey. Like the idea that the dead are pouring out of these grave sites and you've got to go in there and just like quench it somehow is super cool. But there's so much that's going to go wrong with all of these, kind of, so there's a spell called Banishment where,
Oh, that's nuts.
which is insane, where you just sort of point at a unit that's nearby and sort of just chuck them on the other end of the battlefield.
Yeah.
And I see that and I think, that's potentially brutal. That's potentially just kind of makes the maneuvering in the game.
You might as well
nonsense.
kill the unit, yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm moving my Fulminators, I get the charge I want, and then the wizard just goes, no, actually you're on the other side of the board. Like, that's gonna feel real bad.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of these things I could see.
That one is a realm-specific spell, isn't it?
Oh, right, is it?
It is. I think it's Realm of Light specific.
Okay.
So yeah, I agree. That spell's nuts. My thought is that because this is a few concerns. One is it feels like it's going to be mandatory to have something that can do unbinding. And they've shown that there are some new artifacts and stuff that give unbinding to heroes that don't otherwise have it.
Yeah.
And like all the new Stormcast wizards have unbinding. Some of them, and like, for example, one of the new Stormcast wizard heroes has, a bit like some Khorne heroes, the ability to like have one guaranteed unbind per game.
Yeah.
And if I feel like that's partially the answer to this, it's like, oh, we're playing this game in the realm of light. I know that spell is on the board.
Got to bring some guaranteed.
I am not using my guaranteed unbind until you try that shit. And I know you know, and the rest of it. And then you get some depth, and then you get some interplay.
Yeah.
But it could totally, that spell particularly, the whole, like, cause I'd love that, right? Like, you
sure.
deep strike your Retributors or whatever, and it's like, well, bye.
They're over there now.
Like,
They're back on your back line. And that's, there are going to be so many new spells, and there are going to be wonky interactions. And my worry for 2.0 is that it comes out with the new rules and stuff, and then there are a couple of new battle tomes, and then the General's Handbook isn't that necessarily far enough after it to actually watch the community and make adjustments
deal
that are
with the
required.
jank.
Exactly. And there is going to be jank. There's going to be jank. There always is. And it's just an inevitable part of it. It jank that curtain.
You got to jank that curtain. You just got to jank that curtain.
And if it doesn't get fixed, I mean, they will FAQ stuff, but the idea is that then you have a year of kind of insane spells roaming around killing everything and bizarre interactions between Zeech's magic mirror and, you know, these other types of spell. You know, this is going to happen. It's definitely coming.
So this is maybe appropriate, but I love change and I love chaos. So, like, I always like these periods when games enter. Like, I know that I am not a top tier Age of Sigmar player. I don't really want to be.
No.
So I have a different attitude to this than I do. With X-Wing 2.0, I really want an extended period of chaos where everything's kind of viable, because that's very good for the top of the tournament scene. I don't think it's as likely with Age of Sigmar, because Age of Sigmar is not doing a top-down revamp, but also it's such a vast game full of stuff. There will be edge cases. I'm confident, I think, that these changes will mean more interesting games for us. It's honestly like...
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Like, you know, and I think it will mean more interesting games for probably the majority of mid-table players and people playing narrative games and open play games.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Like, all of this is good news for us. Like, because I agree with you, but realistically, my involvement with the top level meta is looking at what's doing well and going, oh.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, and then occasionally playing it in tournaments and going, oh, like.
Yeah, it's not like I see something sick and like, oh, I'll use that against Chris next week. It's not really that type of thing, is it?
And like, you know, cause, you know, I think, you know, before we talk about this in a minute, but like, before my painting plans for the month changed a little bit, and before, you know, we thought maybe this month's episode would be the one where we got back into it with a real big smash up between our armies, and there was the role models meetup. Our community had their meetup, and they gave all of their magic points to you, Tom.
Oh, I need to check
much
up on that.
You do. So, you know, we're going to get back into the campaign, but Age of Sigmar 2 coming along, for me, has put that stuff on pause just until it comes out.
Yeah, totally.
Because it's going to make those games so much more exciting. Like, I was going to suggest, like, if you get the new, what's he called? Lord Arcanum. The wizard on a horse.
Yeah, wizard on a horse. Got it.
Maybe that could be the reforged Lord Castellan. Because he did die.
He did die.
What if he gets reforged? He's a lord now because he was a knight, right?
He was a knight.
Lord, there's a knight castellan and a lord castellan.
He's a lord, I think.
All right, but a different
he's
kind of
a
lord.
great lord. He's a lord.
But he was a wizard.
He's
so
a lord with a horse now.
Exactly.
He's just better than the other.
Yeah,
lords.
and obviously you can still use the castellan. He's just someone else. But that might be really cool.
Yeah,
or even better, his griffhound grows up and he rides around on it now.
Yeah, Griff horse.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, you got it.
Yeah. Oh man.
Because then you can do some because then there's some real cool stuff, right? I want to get in an unbinding war between your wizards and my wizards.
Yeah, which can actually happen.
Yeah, indeed.
Because Stormcast have wizards now, not just prayers that are quite good.
Yeah, so that stuff, all of that stuff, I think is good news. And to be honest, like Age of Sigmar was always better when people are not finding edge cases. Really,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's gonna be good. I'm really, really excited. I'm really excited, especially as a Stormcast player. Get all the good things.
Yeah, indeed.
A new battle tome as well, hopefully.
Well, I would say one thing that really excites me is, so Knight of Shrouds is literally a hero type for Nighthaunt now.
Yeah.
That guy on a horse,
Just one of them.
is just a Knight of Shrouds. The Lordinator is from the
I feel like
Sacrosanct Chamber.
We can extrapolate him.
Yeah. So we got 2 and 2 for new armies from Malign Portent's Harbingers.
Yeah.
There's a heavy rumour that a big next thing for Age of Sigmar is Moonclan Grots, as in the fungoid cave shaman. If Dark Oath is an army, that's where I pivot. Like, I'll finish my Tzeentch stuff, but I fucking love those models, and I will happily do a Chaos Marauder army, basically.
Really sweet.
So
Love to fight
that's got me super excited, and that's something that I'm looking forward to pivoting towards, but like, not yet, obviously, because I've got child-sized robots to paint.
And I got a whole new box of Age of Sigmar 2.9. We haven't seen the box, to be fair. Like, we don't know what's going to be in it.
I think so.
know the
I think the big clue is the fact that some of those models that they've shown are obviously monopose, and some of them look like regular kits, and that is the traditional devise, right?
And
divide.
There's a pretty standard structure to, like, each of the armies will get a badass hero model. So, I think the Knight of Shrouds and Horse will be in there. That's the badass kind of hero model for them. And the Stormcast will probably get the horse.
The Lord Arcanum.
The wizard horse.
Yeah.
And but then you can also see the models that won't be in there. So I don't think the Ballista will be in there for the Stormcast.
I think it might be.
Yeah, you reckon?
Yeah, I reckon.
The Black Coach will be a separate thing. By the way, the new Black Coach model looks as sweet as I imagined in my head.
Did you notice one of the horses is only half a horse?
Yeah, they kind of fade in and out of existence now.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. But all horses do that, so that's fine.
It's true. Completely normal horses. Yeah. Those new Nighthaunt models are so good. We'll be talking about all
that
of them.
box is amazing for you, because I want
to death as well.
Yeah, I know.
Did they listen to the podcast and then make everything for me? Is that what happened? It feels like that, because it's insane, like, how much of this stuff I was excited about. Like, I wanted Magic to be more interesting. I wanted more Stormcast, obviously.
Yeah.
Also, I wanted a Death Army. And, I just have it all now. All I have to do is give them all my money and I've got it. Great.
I have the opposite. I'm so relieved it's not Stormcast versus Dark Oath or something like that.
That would be great. You'd have to get
not because I would be unhappy for that to happen, but because, like, you are at a very different point with maybe we'll get to talking about this in a minute, but you're at a very different point with your shame pile than I am.
Yeah.
I've had to slow down a little bit, and I'm still feeling it. Like, I'm now realizing that, I've been painting Zango for 6 months.
Oh god.
Like, it's taking me a while, and it'll be a cool army when it's done.
Yeah.
But I'm almost happy, that army's arriving into a new edition where I'm more excited to play it. You know?
Yeah.
Like, so I can't take a big release of stuff I really want right now. Like, I'm not interested in Nighthaunt really, and I'm not interested in Stormcast for now. I was thinking about it for a long time, but I think I'll do Ideneth instead.
Nice.
Because I always wanted to do like 1,000 point order army in case you and I ever do doubles.
Yeah, that'd be sweet.
Basically.
Yeah.
So, like, but that can wait. So I'm just kind of chill. I was going to buy the book. It's really nice. And the box of spells, probably. Definitely.
Surely that exists. I think that there'll probably be a couple of spells in the box.
I almost hope not.
Yeah.
Or if they are, I'll custom build whatever they are, because I don't want to get the box.
Because I feel like it'll, to have all these big new endless spells and to be such a big deal in the new edition, to not put them in the core box would be a bit odd. But we'll see.
We shall see.
Yeah. And yeah, a lot of these, like, you can make your own templates. They are just circular things on the battlefield.
They are just bases at the end of the day.
Bases, yeah.
That's true. So that's the end of the news section.
Finally.
We should talk about what we've actually been doing this month, because it's been sporadically super busy for me and then not busy at all. How's your hobby month been?
It's been fairly productive, actually. And in fact, I'm almost at the bottom of my shame pile, which is a very unusual feeling, and it's slightly disconcerting.
Is it nice down there?
Kind of,
Down there on the highest horse.
Down here is where the temptation starts to creep back in. It's where you're starting to look ahead a little bit and think, oh, what's next? And I'm not really close to the bottom of the chain pile, but there's stuff at the bottom of the chain pile that I'm willfully ignoring. So, for example, there's some 40k stuff I could build, specifically Adeptus Mechanicus stuff, that I could get into and start, building up. And there's still some Space Marines and things from the Dark Imperium box from last year I could build and paint. But I'm so kind of into AOS at the moment that they're almost like not on the menu. So, I'm pretty much coming to the end of my AOS, chain pile. And
thank God there's a massive box of stuff you want coming out.
Oh yeah, I know. They typed it so perfectly. Yeah, so this month I've been finishing off the Star Drake, finally. Star Drake Watch 2018. There aren't going to be many more Star Drake Watch 2018 entries, because it's pretty much done, actually. There's just some little bits and pieces to kind of tidy up, and he's based, but the base just needs more kind of tufts and skulls, obviously as many skulls as possible.
There's two kinds of things there are. There's grass and the skulls.
And the skulls. That's all the Star Trek needs now, apart from some blending on the tongue and some other little bits. But he's pretty much there, and he's as good as I could make him at the time, if you know what I mean. Like,
I know that feeling really well.
Yeah, you've reached the level of satisfaction. It's like, this is as good as I could have done with this right now, and maybe in 2 years I could have done a better job, but it's really, really satisfying. And that model's amazing. Apart from supposing kind of issues aside, actually when you see it, it's so imposing on the tabletop. It's massive. It's really huge, and it looks like an enormous, big, terrifying threat, and it looks imperious, and that's what I want for the general of this new force that we're going to be going into Firestorm with. So I feel like he's a great centerpiece, and it's so satisfying to finally get centerpiece pretty much done. So I've moved on to the Vanguard Paladors, who are kind of more complicated than Star Drake, and harder than Star Drake. Because there are so many textures on those things. So to describe them, they are completely ordinary horses.
I gave you a really big problem earlier.
With bird faces, horsey bird faces, and hooves at the back and bird claws at the front. And the models the sculpt is incredible on those. Like the Vanguard Palador sculpt is extraordinary. It's incredibly hard to put together. It took me a whole weekend just to glue 3 of them properly and get them green stuffed and stuff. But they are incredibly dynamic, just to sort of almost look as though they're leaping in midair. And there are these stormcast with javelins. It's kind of poised, almost as though they're about to fly off, but, ready to attack with their spears. And those models are so good. They're also just reams. Their skin is just reams of plastic, just clear plastic, and the model dares you to do stuff with it. Basically, it's just like, are you going to leave this empty? That's boring, isn't it? Are you going to paint it a wild, crazy color because it's a crazy horse, or are you going to do something else? And I've never liked the kind of the dark green paint job that the official Games Workshop painters went with. Obviously, they're excellently executed, really nicely done. But I always felt it was just weird to see green horse chickens running around. So I kind of really wanted to make them look like they could be creatures, like they could be actual animals you might encounter on a fantasy landscape. Yeah,
there's a degree to which the Stormcast horse guide is that the word celestial is sufficient to justify anything.
Right, yeah.
It's like, this is a celestial horse, therefore it's fucking turquoise.
It's turquoise now. And so I thought I would go take some inspiration from the Animal Kingdom and go for the first time with like a whole suite of browns and yellows and very kind of earthy organic colours that I've never painted with before properly, actually, in Age of Sigmar. Because it's all been, ever since I started getting back into this, I've never had cores to paint. Just like beast men or anything like that, or anything leather, brown leather or dark leather, or, skin even. It's all just been plate mail and things like that, just quite clear cut colours and not many organic shapes, apart from the Sylvaneth. So for these I decided that I would try and paint their fur, and actually just like paint it onto the blank texture of the skin and basically freehand the impression of fur onto it, which was a bold project, but treating it almost like a canvas basically, and saying that these bits are going to be as though I'm painting onto a canvas, and say like try and create this, illusion of flowing fur on them, that is just tones of brown and sort of yellowy brown, not going up to like tiger stuff, but just like quite muted. Yeah. In the horsey range of colours that a horse might be. And so I stuck with that, and Was really, really surprised with the results and really, really happy with them as well. So I managed to
They look great. Really.
get the freehand done on all the fur and stuff, and then the rest of it was just kind of blocking out leather straps. And because the fur had so much freehand on, suddenly all the straps of the armor looks really blank and a bit kind of under-detailed in a way. So I went over the straps and have added like loads of kind of scratches and like leather cracks
Makes such
on
a
them,
big difference.
which does make a big difference. And now I realise that I kind of need some sort of equivalent for that for Stormcast armor, because
Chips.
little chips, little kind of cheeky chips on the Stormcast gold armor. Because the Stormcast from the top almost looks like low res. It looks like he's from a different game or something, like a different art asset. Because it's incredibly detailed.
Being overshadowed by his gorgeous horse.
Beautiful horse bird thing. And that thing's like, I was really happy with kind of the colours I managed to mix from Games Workshop's range. Cause the more you look at it, like parts of it, the colours kind of shift across the back. It's got a magnificent arse, Chris. I'm really pleased with the arse, is what I'm saying. You could just look at that arse for an hour and just like, there are just like slight shifts in shade and tone, going slightly more yellow here and slightly more kind of like brown here, brown there. And, with just a touch of,
Hate to watch it ride the wings of Theric, but love to watch it leave.
lots of little kind of very, very tiny little, slashes of, is it Screaming Skull or Screaming Bone or something?
Screaming Skull.
So
Shabdi Bone is...
It's something in that range.
Shabdi Bone is slightly yellow as Screaming Skull.
Oh, it's actually flayed on flesh.
Nice.
Yeah.
You're talking my language. You're
That's
in
right.
Games Workshop's, your Games Workshop's spiciest beiges.
Yeah, so this is like a slightly, pinky peachy beige tone.
Nice.
And this is the wink. Basically, we were talking about winks earlier, like
The wink upon the ass of a horse.
Yes, that's right. But I'm so pleased with the wink on the ass of this horse I painted, Chris. I'm really pleased with it. It's great. It looks super nice and photographs really well. I'm so pleased with it. It took me forever. So I've got 2 more of them to do, and the general on the whatever it's called,
Ordinary horse. Knight Aquila on ordinary horse.
Lord Aquila on completely ordinary horse.
Yeah.
And so that's going to take a while, but it's so much fun. It was really nice to just freehand on this thing, and it's way less stressful than the Star Drake because it's just a unit rather than a centerpiece. So if it kind of goes wrong, like you can just paint over it to the boys and let it be done with. So it wasn't like the Star Drake wings.
You can just yank the curtain on it.
Absolutely, just yank the curtain on that thing. And yeah, that's been super nice. And those models are super good. So I'm really happy because the sort of vanguard face of my army is significantly better painted than the first phase of my army. And so that encourages me because when I finally get the Vanguard force on the table, it's going to be a significant leap in quality. And that's going to be super satisfying and super nice. And hopefully when the new chamber opens, I'm going to incorporate, I painted some other heroes actually. So I'm going to incorporate some of a new color scheme I've, been testing with the new chamber. So I also painted the brother and sister heroes, which I mentioned in a previous podcast, where the sister is, Knight Zephyros.
Yeah.
Twin axes, badass kind of hero slayer. The other one is the model you got me at Warhammer World, Chris, which is
Errant Quester.
Errant Quester, which, isn't in any of the rule books or anything. It just, the only way you can get his rules is in a slip of paper that comes in the box that you get him from Warhammer World, which is kind of crazy. But, he's not too overpowered or anything. He's quite cool. He's just a really awesome model. And so I painted up in a new scheme, which is like dark armor and purple robes, with a bit of gold trim. And, they're going to be members of a different storm host that, which I was thinking about. So you know how Nagash's dungeons have been cracked open and all those souls have been unleashed from the realm of death. So there's a whole storm host of events which actually, they're basically assassins that Sigmar has sent down to just kill heroes at the source and either take their souls or throw them back into, obliterate them. So there are these kind of, they're almost like special forces, Sigmar special forces that he sends off to kill specific heroes. And they've joined up with the Lord Hunter's Vizier to take on the new chaos threat, obviously, that you're going to present. And also, frankly, like a load of the Nagash himself, which Chimp is building. So
how's that guy?
Yeah, it's going to take a while, I think, but I'll keep you updated.
Rad, they look cool.
The scheme is super nice on the tabletop. They look less impressive when photographed, but when you actually see them, They look kind of menacing, but also very knightly in a way that the normal Hammers of Sigmar don't. They've got extra kind of, there's an extra flourish to having trim on them. And what I've noticed about the new Stormhost chamber, the new chamber that's opening up for AOS 2.0, is there's actually loads of extra trim on the armor, and having black armor panels with gold trim is going to be far more viable for them, and might introduce some purple as well, but also keep the
because they've got tabards and stuff as well, right?
Yeah, so I imagine I'll go with the same gold, the same purple for them, and also maybe do some insignia and stuff to signify that they're kind of, a new thing that are still tied in with the Lore Hunters. Yeah, got plans. It's going to be good. It's going to be beautiful. Yeah. Good hobby month. How about you?
Sort of up and down hobby month in some ways, because so back when we finished recording last podcast, I was all in on treating London GT, which I went to in the middle of May, as a sort of finish line for my Tzeentch Mortal shame pile, which really hasn't shrunk very much since we last spoke. I've gotten further, but so it sort of coincided. Then sort of life got in the way in a few ways. I had some big work deadlines and some just sort of like personal kind of motivation things that meant that like I wasn't getting through stuff as fast as I wanted. And while I found it, like I did an insane, I think I spoke about this at the time, I did a kind of nuts sprint to get ready for Blackout last year. Like painted 10 pink horrors and 3 screamers and a hero and rebased like 40 models in 2 days to get ready. And I knew I didn't want to do that again. And I realized that actually I had all this anxiety about what kind of army to run and all this stuff. And I realized at the end of the day, it wasn't worth, while an event can be a very good incentive to get something finished, it shouldn't be a reason to stress yourself out, like, or to, not have fun. And, you know, the Zangor that I've been working on are a lot of work. At the moment, I am several stages deep on all 30 of them, and I'm doing all 30 in a batch, or 29, because I've done one test model. And so, you know, since we last spoke about it, I've base coated all of the bone on all of them, and I'm about a third of the way through all of the gold trim. And that's a lot of gold trim.
Yeah,
Tom.
That's a lot.
Last time I did Zangor, it took me a week to do the gold trim on 6 of them. Like, I basically at the moment, I sit down and it takes me about 20 minutes, half an hour to do all of the gold trim on one of them. And as soon as I did it once, I realized I'm not getting this done on time. Because that's, you know, do the maths basically. That's 15 hours of just doing gold trim, basically. So I just do a couple a day. Like I just do a couple of them a day and put them back down and some work on some other stuff. So I've been doing that and sort of plugging away at that. And then also I realized that like, quite deep in that, and after London GT, I just really wanted to work on some other things, which I'll probably talk about when I talk about London GT. So I started just, expanding, like, I'm really taken with this idea of this little roster of like, unaligned chaos heroes that I'm building up. So currently I've got the Dark Earth War Queen, Dark Earth Chieftain, and Lord on Manticore in that little set. And the idea is that these are my kind of new characters, and they'll probably at least one of them will make their way into an army at a given time. Yeah. And these are sort of distinct from my Tzeentch heroes, for example, in that these characters are all technically unaligned, but all of them lean one way or another in terms of which gods they support. And the idea that I'm sort of forming, because I realized that ultimately I really want to do something I came away, and I'll talk about London GT in a minute, but like something I came away from London GT came away from the event with is a sense that I think ultimately what I'd really like is more of a Slaves to Darkness army. Like I want Tzeentch stuff, but I want it to plug into a kind of army of sort of more kind of traditional Chaos Undivided, I think, eventually. That'd be sweet. And that might end with Archaon as kind of my endpoint. Or at the very least, I love the Varangard models. So Varangard is maybe like a treat I will give myself for finishing my shame pile, that kind of thing. So my idea is, and the first book I read that really got me into Age of Sigmar fiction was Call of Archaon, which is about 3 different heroes trying to reach the Varan Spire to become Varangard. And so, my idea is that I'm going to build this sort of like, imagine if you will, a dark Fellowship of the Ring, who is basically like heroes questing to reach the Varan Spire and become Varangard. Nice. And so, like, I'm just fleshing this out, and this is basically an excuse to paint every Chaos hero model I like, regardless of whether it fits in my army. Right. So, I've made 2 additions to the shame pile, which isn't a good thing, but like, you know, I really want to paint them. One is that the only remaining sort of Slaves to Darkness model that I really, really like is the Chaos Lord on foot, who's sort of holding a spear in a really kind of imposing way and has a sword in its scabbard behind his back and this really cool cloak. And I had this idea I wanted to do for like a sort of, like a slightly different take on Slanesh. So not quite so much the sort of like sinewy sort of live elf thing, so much as like a sort of like languid kind of hedonist duelist, who's going to fit into the army as kind of like a heavy hitter. And also a lot of these characters get a lot better with the new command abilities because they have really good command abilities. So they'll be really fun to play. And I basically just wanted to paint some blends and stuff like that.
Yeah, nice.
So he's coming along. I've only done his, in terms of show notes for tomorrow, I finished painting his face and I'm really pleased that came out. And that was, like, I feel like I'm leveling up painting skin every time I do it. And that was sort of test of a color scheme, but also particularly I wanted to do Slanesh, because, I use a lot of purples and greens and things in my Tzeentch. So differentiating it was tricky. And the key color that I introduced, and it's not as obvious in the photos, but the base of his skin is actually not a flesh color, but orange. And the reason for this, basically I was trying to think of like, what are the sort of like, you know, none of my sort of god specific color schemes are the normal one, and I want to stick with that. So like my corn, kind of the brass and iron thing, it's in the right spectrum, but it's not the red and gold that corn traditionally is. So for Slanesh, I had this idea of this purple to orange gradient. And the reason for the purple is, it's a traditional kind of regal color, right? It speaks to like sort of luxury or excess. The reason for orange, particularly orange flesh on mortals, because I've painted him with quite clear skin. Like he's quite sort of like a weird looking, but sort of handsome, which is sort of the way it should. But the slightly orange tint to his skin is literally because it makes it look like he's got a slightly dodgy fake tan.
Right.
There's like a little touch of Geordie Shore about him, which is like the most Slanesh-y kind of like dimension, or an obvious kind of Trump dimension to being slightly orange that speaks to a certain degree of kind of like sickly excess, right? Which is sort of a way I wanted to push the Slanesh thing without being so obvious about it. Because to stress, like I may sometimes run him with a corn mark or something, or Tzeentch. Like I want it to be ambiguous enough, and there's going to be other things about that model when it's done that mean it can be ambiguous. But little things like that I love experimenting with. I've also started painting, this was a total whim, but at London GT they were selling the usually Warhammer World exclusive Forge World Chaos Dwarf Demon Smith, which is a really cool model. And I've been thinking for a while of how I was going to replace my Chaos Sorcerer Lord in my army, because it's actually quite an important unit for Tzeentch, the Chaos Sorcerer Lord. And you smashed my last one with Galmaraz and turned him into a Castellan. So I don't run that model anymore. So I wanted a replacement. So there's going to be a new character joining that kind of force and that story, who's going to have actually been my previous Sorcerer Lord's mentor. This sort of ancient kind of granite-skinned, not quite Chaos Dwarf, but like sort of like, you know, exile from the Legion of Asgore, who's good at making things on fire with the green flame, basically. But I'm going to do some neat things with his base, and I'll maybe talk to that in a minute as well. That's all kind of early days. Really, I've just been painting gold trim on Zangor and doing bits and bobs of other things.
Dark Fate.
It is, but it'll look good when it's done.
It'll look amazing.
Like, like that unit is going to hopefully look great when it's done. And it'll be one of those things where, because there's fucking 30 of them and I've taken the time to do all the detail, it'll be one of the things that rewards kind of looking really closely at them. And there's an effect I love with miniatures generally, and I love with physical, like the reason I love miniatures and I love dioramas and stuff is that sense that you can keep staring at something and getting more detail. Like that's why dioramas are cool, right?
You should see my horse's ass, Chris.
Exactly.
It's like a diorama in and of itself. It's incredible.
Damn. Yeah, like, I can't really compete with that. So what I've got to do is paint 30 birdmen.
You got to 30
perfectly ordinary men.
They're going to look awesome. Well, your test models are so rad. And it's going to change the kind of complexion of your army as well. In a rule sense, but also just in terms of, they're a more kind of subtle palette than the Tzeentch more generally as well.
They are. Like, I have not a style Bible necessarily, but there's a thing in my mind of how it works. So they're getting iridescent metal armor with gold trim, whereas most of my demons have like this kind of like lapis lazuli turquoise armor with a gold trim. That is literally whether or not it's demonic or not.
Okay.
So the leaders of the Zangor will have that turquoise in like their beak armor and their braces, and it will reflect the fact that they're slightly higher rank. The shaman will have it and some other characters will have it. So I wanted to I was actually thinking about the things you've done with like changing specific colors in your armor of your Stormcast without really changing the whole. And the idea is to create a sense of sort of hierarchy.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So, it's also partly because it's easier to paint, but it's like, and also I think it maybe even looks slightly better. I think the turquoise stuff, the lapis stuff looks better the better I get at painting. Basically that's got like a bottomless skill cap.
Yeah.
But the metal's looking kind of good so far. And like just, but there are certainly going to be things about it that I don't know if they will come off. Like there's, I've proportioned different recess shades across the entire force. So when they're all together, and at the moment it's a little bit distracting because they're not based, they're not finished, they don't have shields and all the rest of it. The shields, for example, will all have the turquoise armor instead of the metal to reflect the fact that they're demonic shields that reflect magic. So there's going to be lots of little beats like that in it, and hopefully it'll all come together. But catch me next month when I still haven't finished them. But yeah, the hope is that when they're all together, they'll have this sort of iridescent color shift kind of effect across the set as well.
That's right. You're brave doing 30. I think most people would like do 10, then do 10 and maybe get distracted by something else.
I realized that I would never finish them any other way.
Yeah.
Like, I thought originally about doing them in batches of 5, all the way to completion each 5, and then do something else. But actually, the gold phase has been so backbreaking that I'm glad, like, I would rather run it as a marathon than like finish it. Because I think if I finished it, I'd just be like, well, I'm never doing this again.
Yeah. Like, you have to force yourself to do it again.
I for my Zinch, I shade bone and gold the same way. Bone is Rakoth flesh with Seraphim Sepia, and gold is Retributor armor with Seraphim Sepia. So I'm holding off on applying shade until both base coats are done, because then I can do it in one pass, which makes sense. But it also means that I'm saving myself a treat, which is the moment when the shade goes on. Yeah. Because you've seen them in their current state, right? And the bone looks super flat, obviously. But the moment the shade goes on, and it's just going to like light up, and it's going to feel so good. And then I do that. Then I do highlights of both. And then I've got mutations, tentacles, feathers, gemstones, secondary weapons, shields, eyes, and teeth.
You sure did buy a Zinch army, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
All the bits that could ever be on the model.
Talking about multiple textures on something that's not a horse.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Much smaller as well.
You also can't see their asses, so I don't know what I'm going to do about that.
That's going to be a problem.
Yeah, a lot of them don't even have anything between their legs. It's just plastic. Which is disappointing, but what you're going to do. Anyway, that's basically like, so it's not a hobby light month for me, but in terms of a progress light month, because it's just like incremental Birdman improvement, which is also incidentally the name of my band.
I can't wait to see them finish, but also I'm glad I don't ever have to do what you're doing.
Well, we're going to have a big Birdman battle.
It's going to be great. It's going to be great. Awesome. There are going to be so many birds on the table.
I think birds were very much last year's AOS thing. This year it's moons.
Maybe that's it. But birds and moons together.
But your bird can moon.
It can.
Because it's fabulous winking at us.
Yeah. I've got to do the rest of them as good as his. That's going to be, that's pressure.
Yeah, you can't. I just made a nice noise.
That was lovely.
Yeah, should we talk about what I've been playing? Have you played games, Tom? Because I appreciate that I've gone to the game apocalypse. So
not really. We talked about the tournament we did last time, didn't we?
Yeah, that was the majority of the podcast.
Yeah, I think because I've been out and Chip's been out, and we've been in different places and busy and stuff. So actually, I haven't played many games at all. I don't really have any battle reports to report. But I will play more before next month. I don't know whether again, it's just like playing games knowing that a new edition's coming out.
Yeah. I liked going to London GT knowing that, because it felt like a bit of a farewell tour to AOS 1.
Yeah, that's nice.
That made sense.
Yeah,
I was sort of like, I played it now.
Yeah, you told me briefly about some of the matches you had, and I've got to say you're one of the unluckiest people to go into. Like, you managed to just run into the worst corners of competitive match play.
I think I am, like, I don't, obviously, perception bias is what it is. I genuinely think I'm hilariously unlucky sometimes.
I think
maybe listen to this podcast might agree with that. Like, I think I have a kind of, maybe it's because I enjoy making a story at times I'm unlucky, but you've seen it. You've been there rolling the dice with me. Yeah. Like, you saw Armin blow
40k as well, yeah. For sure.
It's like,
all game systems, it's insane. On the table, it's something hard to know what happens.
It's like, but, so London GT was quite a big deal for me, and I've been looking forward to it as a holiday, a little treat for myself.
Yeah.
one thing, actually, so a hobby thing I did do, and it's been an absolute revelation for me and has made me much more comfortable about going to more things, is I finally have a good storage solution for my Lord of Change and any other large model.
No.
So what I did, and this is not a new solution, but what I did, and I finally did it though, and it was less painful than I thought. And this is going to be two things, maybe my hobby tips for this month. If yours is just go for that fabulous bone wink on the arse of a horse.
That's it. That's my tip for the month. Just do it.
Then mine's going to be more about practical quality of life stuff. So I'm actually not sure whether to talk about Shadespire first or Warhammer first, but
let's do some Warhammer.
Let's do Warhammer first. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a thing, I come from an X-Wing background and I love Shadespire, and I am not used to the faff of a big tournament in cramped confines when your army is 90 models. X-Wing tops out at like 7 really, and most of the time I've been running 2.
Do you get a tray in X-Wing?
You do, but you got 2 models on it.
That's weird. It's not on me.
So there's, the sort of moving things around, moving things from game to game, all this stuff stresses me out. And additionally, like the very first time I tried to move my Lord of Change, in a big carry case, it got broken. Like I had to fix it relatively seamlessly, but like this stuff is stressful. So improving my storage and transport solution, boring as it sounds, made such a big difference to just my happiness.
Yeah. Did it involve magnets?
It does involve magnets.
And a box.
So what I did is I bought, and I researched getting this exactly right, so for minimal effort. So things I bought that have done this perfectly. Lords of Change are unusually tall and wide. So, and spindly. So they really need this solution. Other models you could probably cram into things, but I'm really happy with this. And it means I've got a solution should I ever get Archaon or Knights or something like that. Or miniature child-sized robots. So what I bought was a self-adhesive piece of flexible ferrous metal, A4 sized, from a magnet company, basically. So not magnetic in itself, but a ferrous piece of metal. And specifically A4 size, because then I bought a really useful box, which is a brand of like plastic office storage container. I think it's their 14 liter one is A4 in its base, which is really handy because things will fit rather than having to measure and cut stuff. And it is of the appropriate, it's quite big, but it's of an appropriate height and width that you can fit, comfortably. Probably any model Games Workshop currently does.
See the start rate we're getting there.
Yeah, definitely.
Sweet.
Then I bought some powerful flat rare earth neodymium magnets and fixed them to the base of my Lord of Change with milliput, not with glue. And that's for a really specific reason, because it dries rock solid, and that bond probably not going to give because like you don't want the bond to be so strong it pulls the magnets off the base.
Sure.
And I don't really trust super glue.
Yeah.
So, and I magnetized my Lord of Change, I magnetized my Belwyn Vortex, I magnetized my, Khorne, Blood Crushers, my, cavalry, like all of those fiddly models that are like going in a case.
They're not going in a foam thing.
Yeah, my Manticore as well. And it works brilliantly. And then what I did is I put that box, which is a big plastic sort of document box, basically, is I have a big, canvas bag, like canvas shopping bag that it fits in. And because it's then hanging, it stays relatively stable.
Yeah.
So you can, and I, walked across town with it. I took it on the tube. Multiple trips to London Stadium for the event. And it was such a relief to be able to transport my Lord of Change. Because when we went to that tournament in Big, I had him on my lap on the bus the entire time.
It was terrifying.
Because I have no other way of transporting him.
Yeah.
Sorting that out was such a big deal. The other thing is I bought, and this was a huge, huge difference maker for me this entire tournament, is I have bought MDF, movement trays. So I've got loads of them now. I've got 40, 25 mil ones for 25 mil bases and 60, for 32 mil bases, which is all my horrors, all my Zangor and stuff.
God, that's so good for a tournament.
It makes such a vast difference.
Yeah.
Because I'm not the sort of person, and I'll probably, I don't know how much I'll go blah, blah, blah through the games, but there's a bit of faff when you set up, but it allowed me to do things cause I was, I'll talk through what my army was, because I had a battalion. It allowed me to, what I would do when I was setting up is put the trays down where they were going to be and put a model from the appropriate unit in the tray and tell my opponent, this is Brimstone Horrors.
And then set them up.
And then keep going. And then when all my stuff was in position, my opponent could start doing their stuff and I would start filling out my trays.
Yeah.
And it just saves so much time. It saves a vast amount of time with movement, although you've got to be careful, obviously, to move appropriately.
Yeah.
So they can the whole block can move, but if you go around corners, you have to be free with taking things off the trays.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. But it saves so much time that, particularly running quite a model heavy army, it makes you feel like you've sort of extended a bit of a kind of good faith to your opponent as well, because you just move a lot faster.
Yeah.
There are some things like, because they are quite big things, they have to be, people sometimes forget to measure to the base of the unit model rather than to the template.
Sure.
Or to the tray. But you can get around that. Like, you just have to remind people, like, if someone's measuring to the, if someone's just getting in range and it just gets to the edge of the movement template, you go like, there's actually a quarter of an inch you're not measuring there. So like, then the only other thing I did is I just sprayed them black with like cheap, like household spray paint rather than wasting good GW stuff on them. And that worked really well. And they look really like, it's chipped a bit, but they'll cover up nicely. And they look pretty seamless and stuff. And it's made, just, like I say, like a vast difference to how easy it is to move things around.
Yeah, I've only done a couple of tournaments, but having encountered slow play, like, I would much rather see someone turn up with those MDF movement trays than to have to move hundreds and hundreds of units one by one by one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. Like, I had an interesting time of it. And I think my goal, and I was thinking it's important when you go to a tournament to have a goal for the weekend. My goal for the weekend was be fun to play with through every single game. Particularly because I had a lot of anxiety about what kind of army to run.
Right.
Because the obvious army for me to build is called a change host, which is a battalion for Tzeentch that requires a Lord of Change and 8 other demon units. So it's something I'm really in a good position to do.
Yeah.
It tends to be seen as a very competitive list because it gets min-maxed in a very specific way, which involves a Lord of Change, also Kairos, and loads of horrors, basically.
Right.
But I was running it with Flamers and, the Chariot, also the Ogre Thaumaturge and the Gaunt Summoner. So I had 3 drops rather than 1, which I could have had. So not optimal. But what it allows me to do is at the beginning of my hero phase, I can swap 2 units that are within 27 inches of Lord of Change. So the idea is you charge my pink horrors only to find out that they were Flamers.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. And it's so good. I really want to play a game against you with it, actually.
Yeah, it'd be amazing.
It unlocks such an extra dimension to that army that it feels like a missing part of that army.
Yeah.
Like, cause it makes them so tricky to play against. But, I'll explain how the weekend went, but like, some players find it frustrating and unfortunately there's a stigma attached to it because it's also a top tier thing. But actually, I found it a really interesting strategic challenge. And some of the games I played that were the best were the ones where my opponent went for the challenge of trying to force my hand with what the swaps were going to be. Like, they played with the potential swaps in mind rather than being surprised when it happened, if that made sense. Yeah. But I had a mixed experience of that. But I had such this anxiety about like running something meta that I worried a lot about it. And so I just decided I wanted to go in and just be fun to play with the entire weekend. And then I had a really kind of weird run of it because it was very packed and there were some stresses with queues on the first day because London Stadium has a pretty stringent security requirement as a high profile venue, which meant thorough bag checks. And so there was a 400 person 40k tournament and about 150 people play and everyone's got a very complicated bag. Yeah. So there was an hour and a half of queuing to get in. Well, because just 400 bags, like it was, and I don't think the event got some stick for a few things, including the quality of the terrain for 40k. I actually quite enjoyed the whole event. The AOS was very, very well run. 40k was vast and kind of unfathomably vast with 400 players,
that's
like
enormous.
200,
that's huge.
200 6 foot by 4 foot tables in a place.
That's crazy.
It was kind of unfathomable. So it wasn't a surprise to me that some of the terrain was just foam blocks. But nonetheless, AOS I really, really liked. We got started and I had a bit of a sort of like, so we're talking about my luck, right? So we sit down and, find my first opponent and, really nice chap. And he's got, Ironjaw's army, like Oryx. And he says like, this is my first game, my first tournament. I'm like, just, I don't know, you're probably going to smash me, but I'm here to have fun. I'm like, don't worry. I'm terrible at this. And I lose the vast majority of my games with Sigmar and it looks scary, but it's fine. We take it slowly. We explain each other's armies, like, just take it, have a good time. At which point the tournament organizer comes over and says, do you guys know either of the guys next to you? And because on the tables next to us, two guys who'd come from the same London club have been matched against each other, which shouldn't happen with the software they use. You enter what club you're part of, so you don't get matched against one of your friends in the first round.
Gotcha.
Would you guys mind swapping? So we were like, okay, yeah. So me and, ships passing in the night, me and a fellow sort of, quite casual sort of here for fun type man got swapped. He got swapped into, I think, a, battle shock heavy death list with Arcan or something, which just annihilated him super quickly. And I got swapped into a Crocnado list.
Yeah, Crocnado.
So we both got fucking annihilated by quite, tournament-minded players.
Yeah. So
Crocnado, if you are not aware, I'd heard of it and I knew what it did and I wasn't ready. So this is probably so if you think my magic is bullshit, this is maybe some of the reasons that it's good. The Balewind Vortex is going away and the magic is changing.
Yes.
So Lord Croak is a Seraphim hero who is a decaying mummy frog. And not mummy as in he's a mother, as in he's like he's wrapped in bandages and he's dead.
Yes.
He is an extremely good wizard. I can't even remember all the ways he's a good wizard. He gets 4 unbinds per turn. He has unlimited unbinds, and he gives himself a certain amount of rerolls per turn that he can also use to reroll my spell rolls.
Yeah, and he doesn't have any range limitations on those.
No, he doesn't have any range limitations.
Wherever.
He also, and then he has 2 spells. One is if it's successfully cast, you roll a dice, and depending on the quantity of the dice roll, you either pick D3 or D6 enemy units, and they each take D6 mortal wounds with no range. No, I say unlimited range. And then his other one is you roll 3D6, and that's your radius. But if he's on a Balewind Vortex, which he almost always is, you times that by 2, and then you add 8 because of a Saurus Astrolith bearer who can be anywhere on the map as long as he's
a small model,
alive. And it's a small model, so hide behind a hill. Yeah. So it's 3d6 times 2 plus 8. Every enemy model encompassed in that radius takes d6 mortal wounds. And he does both of those every turn. We were also playing Knife to the Heart, which is the match play scenario where you set up in opposite corners of the board with one objective each, and they're as far away as possible from each other. So there was basically
such a bad scenario.
It's a bad scenario, but also, my Lord of Change has the command trait where he has a 27-inch unbinding range, which is normally very good. In that scenario, I had no choice. I had to try and get my Lord of Change in range of Croak to start unbinding those spells, because every turn I'm just losing models by the handful just to Croak's magic, and there's no way I can get anything in range. Yep. I tried a real Hail Mary play at the start by putting the Changeling next to Croak, and taking the first turn so that I could try and nuke all of his stuff with Croak's own spells, because the Changeling knows the spells of any wizard he's near. And so I really went for it, committed, put the Changeling down next to Croak, used 2 Destiny dice to confirm the spell on 10. Two Destiny 5s, basically, to confirm a 10 for the spell cast. Yeah. But unfortunately, he rolled a natural 5 and 6, so I unbind, and then it was over, basically. Yeah. Also, Croak can't be killed normally.
No.
You have to, every turn, he takes a battle shock test equal to the amount of wounds he's taken, and if he fails the battle shock test, he has bravery 10, then he dies, and if not, he heals everything he's taken.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So, also, he had the Dread Saurian, which is the giant Forge World dinosaur. Yeah, that thing can teleport.
It can teleport, and Chimp and I fought this in the doubles tournament at Warhammer World, which we've mentioned in the previous podcast. And yes, it can teleport, and that's what they did to us as well. Like teleported within range. It's super dicey, that thing.
Yeah,
it gets 2d6 attacks.
Every time it touched one of my units, that unit vanished.
Okay, so what happened with me was that a unit of 5 adjudicators held it up for the entire game. Well, for 3 turns. They died eventually, but it couldn't hurt them. So that thing it goes 2 ways real fast. So,
I mean, actually I should stress, like, maybe this makes it sound later. Like, I think that rule stuff is, like, I'm not a fan, like, of what's going on there.
I do think, Chris, what's happened here is that you have been zinched.
To some extent.
Because this is what it feels like playing Zinch sometimes.
Yeah, I get that. I do get that. However, my stuff has, apart from the Bellman Vortex, someone on top of it, an 18-inch range. Right? Like, I do get it. But what I feel like, so this game in the end, and the guy was lovely, a guy called James, and the army was really nice looking. But there was a sense that, like, there was nothing I could do.
Right.
Like, I had to get my Lord of Change out in front to try and get him into range, but that's still like 2 turns of running. And as soon as he left safe bubble, he had deep striking Ripidactyls that came down and killed the Lord of Change in a single round of combat.
Yeah, Ripidactyls are still alright, yeah.
Yeah. As soon as that was the case, I was screening to try and stop the Red Saurian getting into range, but every single one of my units was taking 1 or 2 D6 mortal wounds every time.
It's insane.
Bear in mind, like, you know, my Lord of Change can do insane numbers of mortal wounds, but on average, he does about 5 or 6 mortal wounds a turn.
Yeah.
In here. And I've done it a lot now. Like, I feel like a good thing about this event is I know my army a lot better and I know what kind of damage to expect. Like, he dies super quickly, and he gets much less effective as he takes damage. Like, I did feel bad. I lost that game 2,000-0. I didn't kill a single thing, and I lost everything.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't get close enough. Like, you know.
You didn't have shooting as well. That's the thing.
Well, I've got pink horror. I've got shitloads of shooting.
Yeah.
It's just 18-inch range.
Yeah.
Like, this is what's interesting to me. Is like, the weakness of Zinch is, so I agree with you that, like, it does feel like I got Zinch.
It's the game feel thing.
However,
yeah.
Like, a thing I found heartening, and this is going to be a theme for the coming games, is every fucking army is like this. And I honestly, I think Skyfires are overtuned, but we don't play with them.
No.
Like, honestly, like, there's so much stuff in Age of Sigmar that does a shitload of mortal wounds, or so many hits you can't hope to deal with it, that it's not a specific army thing. Everybody has moments and phases and situations where they do an overwhelming amount of damage. And I would say every time I've been in a position to capitalize on that as Zinch, and we'll get to this, it's been because of a mistake my opponent has made or something I've done well, which is how it should be. And it's the same for my opponent. My next game, so I lost that one disastrously, but I was like, well, that's me to the bottom tables. I literally went to the bottom table because the loss was that bad, where I faced a Cunning Ruck.
Oh, yeah. It's the other really...
which is the one where a million orcs shoot you 180 times.
Yeah.
So this was actually a really interesting one because it was not the traditional kind of rock in that it was a big block of 30 arrow boys, another block of 10 arrow boys, a block of 30 non-arrow boys, spear boys, like a shitload of gore grunters, and these crazy savage orc guys I'd never seen before that are all carrying a giant spear, like 2 of them carrying one massive spear.
Oh, well, don't know what they are.
I don't know what they are.
Cool.
But it was a really interesting game because I ended up taking the first turn because I underestimated the threat range of his savage orcs. Because if you're not aware, they get the ability to fly, do all sorts of things. So I used this to kind of move a bunch of dudes out of the way. Like, I can't remember beat for beat. It was a really strange game in some ways because, so a lot of the Savage Orc spells, if the successful casting roll is a double, you double their effect. So I took the first turn, so that I could, when I realized this, I took the first turn so I could hide my Lord of Change, basically, because he had to go somewhere.
Yeah.
Hid him behind a tower. But then, my opponent got a double roll for the fly spell anyway, which allowed his block of 30 orcs to fly 15 inches on the first turn.
Right.
And then still shoot. Which was enough to kill the Lord. Like, so what it should have been able to do is kill the Gaunt Summoner and the Lord of Change, at which point the game is over. What he managed to do is kill the Gaunt Summoner, and then, by a miracle, a dice miracle of my own, I had to roll, he didn't have everyone in line of sight, but he still got 28 wounds through off the 180 attacks. And I domestic shielded myself, but I managed to roll 22 saves on 28 4-ups.
What? 4-ups? Wow,
Yeah.
that's just amazing.
And so the Lord of Change survived with 7 wounds.
Yeah.
And then luckily, I then managed to win the roll off. Cause if he'd gotten a double turn then, if he went second, it's over as well. Yeah. But I then got the roll off and then managed to just open up the mortal wound cannon and kill all of those savage orcs and kill the bulk of his shooting threat straight away, which is as close as I've ever come to surviving against this list. But there's so much that's cagey about that. Like, I wouldn't have even been in that situation if
the rolls had gone normal.
Yeah, like they were absurdly good for him, and then they were absurdly good for me. So we ended up in this weird situation. It was an interesting game. Like, and then what ended up happening was I think I made some, like, I screened a lot. I made one big mistake where it was the one where it was what's it called, Duality of Death, where only heroes can capture points. And there were two things I forgot. One is that heroes heal when they hold points in that mode, and I also full on just forgot to kill one of his heroes. But I was basically doomed after that point anyway. Put me in a it was an interesting game because I was sort of playing catch up, like screening and trying to protect heroes. But even 10 of those arrow boys put out so many shots with the Cunning Rook thing twice a turn that any of my heroes are dead. This is one of the reasons that new shooting rule is so important. Because they hit on 5s. But
that's going to kill Cunning Rook, which is great.
Yeah, which is great. Like, and it meant that, like, so my, you know, the Changeling and my, what I should have done, I think in hindsight, is actually deploy the Changeling in the backfield to try and dispel some of those spells on the first turn.
Yeah.
But he would have died immediately. And because the mode requires heroes on points, the other thing about Cunning Rook is they have shitloads of heroes. And they're quite hard to kill, like 4 save against mortal wounds, that kind of thing. Yeah. Because they all get saves against mortal wounds because they're war paint. So I had to start killing heroes basically to try and prevent him from scoring, and I just couldn't get all of them. But what was really interesting about his army that I really liked about it is because he had the second wave of like gore grunters and really tough melee orcs.
Yeah.
It wasn't just, oh, the shooting's gone, it's okay. It's like, the shooting's gone, I've killed the thing that would take me out of the game in the first turn. But then I ended up losing on turn 3 or 4 because I didn't have enough left after dealing with that to soak up the charge, for example, and stop him from wiping me out. Then he managed to get the fly roll off again on a double on the flying orcs with big sticks, that then flew over a mountain and stabbed the Lord of Change to death with a big stick.
Pretty good mental image.
It was good, yeah. It was a fun game. It was a strange one because I think because I got it was one of those games where you have a very different sense of what's going on to your opponent. Because I was basically terrified from the start. And, but my opponent was pretty sore about my Lord of Change surviving that first round of shooting. And so, which is fair because I got very lucky.
Lucky dice, but
it was also the difference between there being a game after that and there being no game at all after that. And obviously, so the big things, the things that meant that we got a second turn were I saved the Lord of Change by a miracle and won the roll off and therefore got a second turn and could start killing things. But it was a strange situation, and this is a situation I think people need to watch out for generally with their mood when it comes to games, which is sometimes you have to just almost step back and realize that you're winning. Like, right. Because I was so on the back foot. Like, I couldn't get heroes near the points. Everything was mobbed in orcs. He was so far ahead on points, I was probably never going to catch him, but it was still quite a sort of, like, I was still apologizing for getting spells off and killing things, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And just simply because the sort of mood had shifted with that kind of miracle survival at the start.
Yeah.
So I do think, there's sort of a sense of like, I was apologizing for not losing harder. Which was alright. Like, again, it was sort of one of those experiences where, this was the entire first day, which was 3 rounds, was a little bit like this. There was like a tabling at the start by a very lovely man. And then the second guy was really nice as well. And actually, to his credit, and I should stress this, he apologized afterwards. After he'd won, he apologized for having been a little bit salty through the entire game.
Everyone apologizes after they've won.
Yeah, exactly. But I felt that kind of like we'd had such different senses of what was going on. Yeah. Like I was just looking at like the game I couldn't win.
That list is so weird. I mean, not that specific list, but the Cunning Rook is so weird because it doesn't win stuff. It just turns up and just gives people a bad time and then doesn't actually get anywhere. Yeah. It's one of those just like bad feel lists that should be out of the game already and will be, once the new one comes around.
And like, I mean, and like I say, maybe that sounds a little bit salty of me, but it was like, I'm very attentive to, I think, other people's mood. Cause I'm aware that my hero phase sucks for people. So I wanna, like, you know, there's lots of little things I do to try and make it better for people. Like, if the range is in any way ambiguous, I will always rule in my opponent's favor. Because if it's ambiguous, then I made a mistake. Like, I should have made it clear. And I don't want people to feel like it was an edge case sort of, you know, 50-50 chance of that actually being 18 inches or something. Like, I really want us to agree, and it's more important that we agree and are in the same place about what's going on than it is that I win. So, yeah, if it's ambiguous, you know, whatever. But I think, this will happen in a later game where an opponent really wanted to make sure that their hero was in 18 inches of my Lord of Change for one of their abilities. So when it was my turn, I could say, we know this is in 18 inches because we just executed this entire turn. Yeah. I'm going to set you on fire now. And that feels better to me.
Statement of intent. It seems a really big deal. Something I need to learn more is like, here's what I'm trying to do here. Is this okay if I do it this way?
Yeah, and I'll explain my entire list of how it works, and what all the spells do, and like really make sure people understand, because I don't want to give people a bad time. Whereas, I mean, Cunning Rock isn't that. It's quite simple, really. It's just...
It's still a bad time.
Bottomless dice. It's also because the amount of time you have to spend watching the other person roll dice, because they have to roll so many.
It's the same as Zinch, though.
They get rerolls and everything.
That's the bad feel about Zinch, though. Like, is that...
Really?
It's the fact that the hero phase is just loads and loads of modifiers going off, and then loads and loads of dice, and it's just you just sit there for 20 minutes and...
That'll change when you have, like, I have seen that from the other side, like, when there's wizards on both sides, it does change. Because there's that, when am I going to use my Dispel?
That you're actually involved to that extent.
Yeah. I can totally understand where you're coming from.
But I mean, Zinch should be really powerful for the Magic phase. That's the whole deal of that army. It's just that the rules around Magic at the moment, as they stand, are really one-dimensional. Yeah,
I mean, we talked about this. I'm looking forward to it being the case that we're both controlling spells in that phase, and trying to, like, jockey for position and that kind of thing. Yeah. It can only get better. Yeah, but I agree. Like, I think I'm talking about something specific about your opponent rolling, because we talked about this a little bit before, but when you're rolling 180 dice and you've got rerolls and stuff, it's a long time. Yeah. Like, it's longer than my entire hero phase to resolve that shooting attack. Like,
yeah, honestly. I really dislike that as a point of rules writing, because you can emulate similar odds with fewer dice. You know, even in a D6 system, you can do that. And this happens with skeletons as well. Like, there's a recent, like, Warhammer community post saying, skeletons in a perfect situation can get 480 attacks. I'm like, that's terrible for a game. Rolling 480 dice is terrible for a game. Like, where are you going to roll them? Like, how long is that going to take? You know, your opponent's got to read all the dice as you're trying to read them and pick them out and stuff. That's not fun. Rolling hundreds of dice isn't great.
Something I did before I went to London GT is, figured out the maximum amount of dice I would ever need. And then, obviously short of a huge dice disaster, but you can always borrow your opponents, whatever, for stuff like that. And make sure I knew exactly how many of each color dice I had. Yeah. So I had exactly 20 green dice with me, because 20 is a number I roll a lot. So it was like, I can quickly get my dice pulled together. And that was sort of little that's sort useful. Of like speed play things. That's good. That's
a good tip, actually.
So my third game of the first day. So after those two, I was having fun, but I was having very much like, getting tabled fun, if that makes sense. And also getting tabled while also feeling faintly guilty about my army, which is sort of a weird thing. And the third game, was interesting. So it was up against a Legion of Night, force led by Manfred, Mortarch of Night.
Yeah, awesome.
Whose deal is that he can basically deep strike undead units or death units.
He's a sneaky fellow.
He is a sneaky fellow. So it was Manfred and 2 necromancers, 2 big blocks of 40 skeletons waiting to be pulled out of grave sites, and 3 or 4 units of Morghasts, who are the giant flying skeleton really Reaper men. So the idea was that Manfred would use his ability to deep strike the Morghasts. And so this is obviously like quite an all-in strat. It's like just drop a really heavy unit right on top of something important and kill it. I've forgotten exactly what this was. It's actually the reasonably standard match play one where the point in your own territory is worth 1 point, the points in the middle are worth 2, and the points in your opponent's territory is worth 4.
Yeah.
That one.
I really like that scenario.
Yeah, it's good. It's dead standard.
Yeah.
And so he put all his grave sites right on top of me, put his grave sites on the side objectives, very aggressive. So I basically just formed a ball. Like, round Lord of Change, horrors, screening, other horrors, screening, other horrors. So that the logical order that they would die in would mean that they could split into each other's units, which is free, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's good.
So, and I sort of set this up, because actually something I found from playing against you quite a lot is a situation where I'm quite comfortable is screening against scary deep strikers, which is functionally what this was. Yeah. Cause it's like, I'll let you hit some horrors. That's fine. Particularly with the change host, because I'll just swap them out for some different ones. And so what happened was, I gave him the first turn. As predicted, and I gave him the first turn and I placed the changeling right on top of one of the midfield objectives. And then what he did was deep strike all of his Morghasts onto my formation at various points in my back line. They all charged units of horrors and did quite a lot of damage to the horrors. He then pulled one of his blocks of 40 skeletons out onto the objective surrounding the changeling, which is very funny because the changeling's just a skeleton now. Cause they still haven't revealed him because he's not a hero. Yeah. And they padded him in so much there was no way a hero could ever get in there. So like he's basically there for good as far as anyone can tell.
Wow.
But then basically what happened is because, then the Tzeentch double turn happened and and also he cast a spell on, Manfred, who's riding his Mortarch beast thing, which allowed him to, his horse, which allowed him to move like 24, 25 inches in the hero phase. Yeah. So he shoots across the map and he ends up about 9 inches away from the Gaunt Summoner, but then fails his charge, which is going to happen on a 9-inch charge, right? Like
1 and 3, 1 and 3 to make it, roughly.
1 and 3 to make it, right?
Yeah.
So he fails it, but that, like, I felt bad for the guy because I think he'd had quite a rough day. But it was that situation of like, if I get a double turn now, you're boned.
Yeah.
Like, pun not intended. And I did. So, Lord of Change annihilates Manfred. Because, he'd parked Manfred 9 inches away from the Gaunt Summoner and the Lord of Change, so I should say. Yeah. So, it's the perfect situation for me. Like, I've learned so much about how Tzeentch magic works, and the big problem, like, one of the things that holds it in check is the fact that, unlike in 40k, you do magic first, then you move. So if you're not in 18 inches, and you don't have some way to move it swapping or something like that, you're not getting in range for those spells, right? And that's where so much of your damage comes from. That's potentially a wasted turn. So, Christmas for Tzeentch is you have parked your general in front of a Lord of Change on the second turn of the round.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I'm just going to start casting spells, and I did, and he died. So I killed Manfred, and in the first 2 turns of the game for me, I killed Manfred, 40 skeletons, because the Gaunt Summoner up on Vortex sets fire to skeletons, forces their battle shock, which kills them, and then 2 Morghasts. You also some dire wolves and things. And then the rest of that game was sort of just getting the pieces into position. The best thing about that game was, so I had him on the ropes from that point, because it's like there was no, I'd just done so much damage so quickly. And I appreciate that can suck to be on the receiving end of it. But the way you play against Tzeentch is be very careful what you put in range, because it's actually very predictable what can be magicked.
Yeah, it's a matter of experience though.
Yes, it is.
By looking at it, you don't realise exactly how much can be
how much danger you're in.
Yeah.
Like, because if he gets that charge off, maybe loads of important things die. But if he doesn't, it's, as ever with Age of Sigmar, it's knowing how much you're gambling.
Yep.
Basically.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
But the best thing about that was like, so the Ogre Thaumaturge was kind of like low key a hero for me all weekend, because he's secretly really good, just really underestimated. Good. So, in one turn, the Ogre Thaumaturge killed a bunch of direwolves so that the Changeling could take an objective, then charged and killed a Necromancer, and then on the next turn, charged and killed another Necromancer, in doing so preventing him from ever bringing his other block of 40 skeletons onto the board. So in one Necromancer flattening combo, basically just ended the game for me, and the guy conceded, like, off the back of that. And it was such a nice kind of, like, the rest of it was kind of in the bag, but, like, it was nice to give the Ogre a bit of a go of it.
Go someone.
Yeah, and so that was day one, and it was fun, but at the same time I had this feeling that, like, the game I won off the back of an opponent's mistake more than anything else. That might have been due to lack of experience or just tiredness or been a bit fed up after a day of rough games. And the other 2 were drubbings, really. Not uninteresting. Like the Cunning Ruck game was more interesting than the Croak game, but it wasn't like, I didn't have that kind of like, I hadn't had that real kind of like thrill of a really good game. Luckily, day 2 was 2 really good games. So, on day 2, the 2 games, I'll speed through this because I appreciate it going on, but like, first game was against, Beastclaw Raiders, which is a really interesting matchup. He had 10 models in his entire army.
Yeah, they're an interesting list because they used to be super dominant. They used to be really powerful.
Yeah.
So they've got hardly any units, but they are like enormous shaggy mammoths that do loads of
mausoleums.
He had
4 mammoths and 6 dudes on smaller horses.
But that thing, they're really quick and then they do multiple wounds and then either you die or you die.
Yeah, the mortal wound output is nuts.
Yeah, it's insane.
Like, it's a 2 up to hit, 6 mortal wounds.
It's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, they are crazy. Yeah.
Like, and that's that.
But they're not capturing objectives. They're going to delete your army or that's it, I think.
Yeah, and we were playing, Star Strike, where the things come down.
Good scenario.
And, I was really pleased with how I played this. This was the one where I was like,
Horrors are good for this.
Horrors are good for this. But also, like, it was like, I was like, I made some right decisions. I didn't just get given the mortal wound buffet handed to me, basically.
Yeah, nice.
So, what I did was, I actually, like, I was constantly asking him which big horse man was which. Because his leader has this thing where all wounds he takes are halved.
Yeah.
But to a minimum of 1, which was the FAQ. So if I do, 20 mortal wounds to him with a crazy good roll on the Lord of Change, he only takes 10.
Yep.
Which is getting inefficient. I gave him the first turn and he moved a bunch of stuff into range, and then I used my swaps basically to, put loads of horrors, as many horrors as I could fit with my swaps, in front of, his leader. Who still got a good save and stuff. But what that meant is I could then move up and throw like a couple of 100 4 up shooting attacks at him. And that was enough to kill him on the first.
Wow, nice.
And that's because, he's got like 12 wounds, but it's like enough of them go through. I think his saves are a little bit cold. Like, and that's unfortunate. But it was like, I just realized like mortal wounds are actually not going to do this. Like my 1 damage shooting attacks are actually better because the full damage goes through. Yeah. But the really cool thing about this is I deliberately took 120 points of summoning rather than 100 needed for the Bellwind Vortex, because I didn't want to have to always use the Bellwind Vortex. And in this game, instead of summoning the Vortex, because it doesn't do very much, I used it to summon 3 Screamers, a unit people don't think are very good. Use them to initially tie up some of the so those horrors that had moved forward to shoot acted as a bit of a screen. Screamers moved up onto, when the first meteor came down, it came down right in the middle of the board. Screamers moved up onto that, and then the next turn I swapped them so that they were, no, hang on, no, I didn't. I used them to hold the objective so I could get other blue horrors onto it, and then move them out to tie up another unit, and just kept sort of managing these sort of, like demon exchanges to kind of do the screening, and then ended up with a situation where the Ogre Thaumaturge basically just charged and held up 3 very big horses by himself for a turn, killed one of them, and then got the other ones down, at which point I'd managed to get Flamers and the Screamers to his backfield objectives and just held all of them. And it was just, for me, it was a really satisfying game of like, and a really, really lovely dude. With a nice looking army as well, a guy called Ian. And like, it was just one of those sort of like, I knew exactly what I wanted to achieve on every turn and did it, but without sort of obvious shenanigans. It was just sort of like, it was nice that summoning something other than the Vortex turned out to be the right approach. Yeah. I did try something, really, really dumb. So the Gaunt Summoner, if he lands a wound, you roll 2 dice. And in melee, if you roll 2 dice, and if you can beat your opponent's bravery, you instantly remove a model. Normally this is bad, because most things are only, because you want to kill something there's only 1 model in the unit, like a hero. Yeah. But most heroes have really good bravery. Guess what doesn't have good bravery? Big horses.
Do they not?
Well, no, because they're just a line unit. Like, they're just a huge line unit. So I charged one with the Gaunt Summoner and missed.
Oh, lucky.
And then he got completely flattened. Yeah. But he tried.
Worth a shot. Yeah. Turn him into ribbons.
Yeah. So yeah, getting to the end. My final game, was against a guy called Gianni. And this was one of those sort of like, I was feeling good after that game, but also I was feeling good because I got, shortlisted for Best Painted. So I was in the top 10 Best Painted at the event, which is really nice. And I'd like to talk about that a little bit, I think, as well, if we've got time. Like, but by some kind of crazy coincidence, this guy, Gianni, who had a really cool Stormcast army, but converted with Fire Slayers. Yeah, so they look like kind of ascended Fire Slayers.
Pretty cool.
With some Fire Slayers. He and I ended up on the same table, for Best Painted for display.
Oh, sweet.
So, and this game took place after those displays were taken down. So I was like, why don't we just play here? So we just turned our armies around and went for it, which was really nice. And he was a really lovely dude. And this was genuinely one of the best games of Age of Sigmar I've ever played. To give you the highlights, we played, what's it called? Oh, fuck. I forgot the name of it's the one where it's the good scenario where you can tag an objective and then leave it.
I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah.
It's not the one with the ridiculous, deployment zones.
Yes. It's the crazy staircase deployment zone one.
Yeah.
Right. And so he had, a Stardrake, a unit of Tempestors, which are the Fulminators with crossbows.
Yeah.
Fulminators, loads of Volkite Berserkers, and a Fire Slayer hero that lets him tunnel. And then 3 units Adjudicators in space.
Okay.
Basically.
Yeah.
So very little deployed.
Yeah.
So I, redeployed the, Changeling onto one of his backfield objectives and then let him, go first. So what he did was untunnel all of his Fire Slayers onto that objective in order to kill the Changeling, which he then did. Sacrificed the Changeling, but it meant that I knew exactly where his Volkites were, so I could Gaunt Summon it away. And then my first turn managed to kill all of his Volkite Berserkers, or like down to about 3 or 4, and his Stardrake with just Actually, no, it was I got a double turn, which was super important. Lord of Change totally... was it a double turn? No, I think it was actually just 1 turn of magic, but it was a kind of a nuts turn where I had to cast I cast maybe 6 spells to kill the Stardrake in a single turn.
Yeah.
And it ended with me having to cast... No, it was a different turn, because it ended with me having to cast it had exactly 1 wound left, but it had the Castellant buff on it. So I knew that if I shoot it, I'm going to heal it back to full, basically, as far as I could tell.
Yeah.
So, and I had nothing else. I had no other mortal wound thing I could do. So, apart from the Gaunt Summoner's anti-horde spell, where you pick and roll a dice for every model in the unit, and before it puts a mortal wound. So I just cast that, and with 1 target, and I got a 4. And so I managed to kill it. At which point, he obviously looked pretty sad because he'd lost that, and then I managed to take out his Fulminators. But we ended this really, really tense back and forth where the Judicators came down on my back line because I gave him a space, which I really shouldn't have done, and started causing real problems. And because you get extra points when you take an objective from your opponent, we were both trading them back and forth all the time. And it ended with this crazy just series of things. So the game in the end was 14 points to 13 to him. But on the final turn, we had this nut situation where I needed a natural 1 on some Pink Horror Battle Shock to hold onto a point and didn't get it. But I did get a natural 1 on some Brimstone Horror Battle Shock, which kept 1 Brimstone Horror alive, which was enough to allow me to swap that 1 Brimstone Horror for 20 untouched blue horrors. 20 units, 20 models automatically cap a point. So they could take a point that my opponent had taken in the backfield.
Get double points. So.
At which point it comes down to only the Ogred Thaumaturge, who has to kill a Fire Slayer hero and then a Relictor, and he loves Relictors. In a single turn. And he can actually do this because he gets mortal wounds on the charge and things. I managed to shoot off one of the people on that point, kill the Fire Slayer hero with a Fire Blast from the Ogred Thaumaturge, make the charge into the Relictor. And because he does mortal wounds when he charges, it's D3 mortal wounds when he charges, he was on 1 health, so he gets +1 to hit. So he has the potential, I think he can do up to about 10 damage in the combat phase, but I managed to do 1 damage in the entire round of combat, just on natural dice, basically. And it was over, but it was such a good game. And it was just one of those, like, I've sped up a bit. It was the one I probably would have unpacked if it was not so long ago as well, but it was such a good, like, crazy run of, like, decisions and counter decisions. And for me, I think the important thing about it was that, like, I did the Zinch thing. Like, he accidentally parked his Stardrake 18 inches away from the Lord of Change and really paid for it. But also, throughout the entire game, he was playing against all the stuff he knew I could do. He was measuring to see about my swaps. He was figuring out which units could swap, potentially, and trying to have contingency plans for, like, what if those horrors become flamers or whatever.
Yeah.
And that felt really good. It felt like we were both engaged with the game. And I had a great time. I think he had a good time, and it was just such a really nice end to the weekend. And I think the thing about that made me realize is, like, and I said this before, I think, but, like, taking a sufficiently active interest in how your opponent's stuff works that you can reach for the counterplay makes those games feel so much more alive. And it's not to say that there always is a counterplay. And I appreciate that I put opponents in situations where there's no counterplay to what I'm doing. And I've been in situations where there's no counterplay to what my opponent's doing. But I think there is a grey area that a lot of games of Warhammer exist in, where there is a counterplay, but it takes a little bit of extra learning about your opponent or a bit of stretching beyond your normal game plan to get at it, which is probably how you become a better player, and he won that game and he deserved to win that game. But also how you end up having more fun with those matchups.
Yeah, I think that can only happen when people bring relatively balanced lists that aren't trig lists.
True.
So I think you see a lot of the tournaments, people bring a list that does one thing well, and either it does it or it doesn't, and it's not flexible enough to really adapt and be generically good in lots of different scenarios. It's the Croaknado is just, I mean, it's going to die to certain armies, which is why you don't see Croaknado lists winning all the time, because certain things just shoot Croak and that's the end of it. And that's kind of what the game you played at the end. That was the ideal. That's when two people bring armies that are flexible and can do a lot of different things, and then people match wits.
Yeah, you're
that's
right.
Awesome. No one's trying to game the meta. It's just about doing the war game.
Yeah. Yes, you're right. I think, first place and second place were both plague-touched warbands.
Right.
And then third place was a murder host and fourth place was a change host, I think. So it was very much the sort of, I think so. Maybe it was something different. I think I might be actually completely wrong about that, but it was a very meta top half.
Yeah.
And that's the nature of the game. But you're right, it does come alive when people run relatively, not just balanced, but even though my army's nonsense, it still worked.
But it's still got infantry, it's got a bit of combat, it's got a couple of centerpieces and some wizards. It's not like a one note, one trick thing.
It's not min-max, that's for sure.
Yeah. And Stormcast by their very nature can't be a Hammer Strike is gone. That used to be the big trick list.
Yeah.
And there's another one that people were running recently, but for the most part, Stormcast tend to be fairly, you've got lots of different units, they do lots of different things, you have to play adaptively.
So, I appreciate that we're running along this pod, but I did really want to talk about what Best Painted made me learn.
Yeah.
I can probably do this quickly. So, a really important thing I learned about painting for events and stuff, and I thought this is something that, it's one of the reasons I came home and started thinking differently about what I wanted to do. But I was really chuffed to get nominated. Really chuffed. And as soon as I saw the other entries, I was like, I'm not getting further than nominated. This is fine. There was a guy had done a non-metallic metal Stormcast army. That was okay. But one thing that struck me though is I started to look at things closely and I realized that I thought if it was judged and it was judged purely on smoothness of blends and brushwork stuff, I think I would have been in with a shot of top 3. Not maybe not top, but pretty high up. The places where I was really far behind, I think, were things like contrast, basing, and conversions specifically. A lot of the armies that looked great didn't look great super close up. They had really good tabletop look. Yeah. And a lot of that came down to things like really bright bases, really aggressive highlighting. I paint colorful models, but I tend to be quite cagey with highlighting. And I think it's because I paint in my conservatory in daylight and then under a really good light otherwise. So aggressive, the things you're talking about, that wink that makes the horse ass shine.
That's all you need.
Right? That takes, I think you paint in good light as well for the most part, right? You can sometimes feel like I'm breaking this, and then you look at it and you're like, holy shit, that looks way better than I thought it would. That's something I really need to learn, I think. I think it's a big difference between painting for, something I kind of figured out is it's a very different thing to paint for a judged painting competition where you're painting for judges that pick it up and look under good light. And when you're painting for what would be the case at most events where it's a player vote based on people doing a tour of the table. Those are very, very different things. And I realized that this is not a problem I can really solve for my Zinch now because there's the old logic of have a dark base if you have colorful models, which is what I've done for my Zinch. But actually the stuff that was winning has extremely colorful bases for extremely colorful models. Yeah. And it's just all bright all the time.
Yeah.
And it looks just good. It just looks very poppy and kind of don't know how well it would photograph super close up necessarily, but it was very effective. And yeah, it was a real eye opener in terms of like how to paint to win.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Would you
want to do that though, or would you, on your shelf at home, would you prefer to have something that kind of looked good under the lights that you normally look at them under?
I don't know, because I think I'd like to push it a bit further. Like, I think it's not a case of like, my stuff's perfect for the situation it's in. I think it would be better. I think that's the thing. It's like taking more time over bases, for example, is something I could definitely do because it makes a huge difference. It was heartening to realize that like actually my issues weren't wholly technical. Like if I'd gotten there and like, I remember when I was in Cardiff, the best painted nominations were just better than my stuff in every regard.
Yeah.
So I was like, I didn't make the cut, and for obvious reasons, that's fine. But in this case, it was like, oh, actually, like there's technical stuff that I feel like I'm doing as well, if not better than a lot of people. But it's like, what's lacking is the sense of the whole, or like that kind of wow factor from a big conversion, even if that conversion isn't painted particularly elegantly. Like, you go like, oh shit, look at that. And like, that's what counts. People are voting.
There's also a sense you have to get away from the expected identity of the army.
Yeah.
You have to do something kind of crazy, especially painting Stormcast, for example. Like, everyone's seen Stormcast. Like, people, if you're into AOS, you're so overexposed to them. They're being released all the time. The Hammers of Sigmar. So you're never going to win best painting with the Hammers of Sigmar colour scheme, I think. Like, you could be beautiful, it could be in normal metals, but I think on the tabletop, it's going to look like default. Yeah. And it's not going to pop out to your people, your average consumers who are there playing the game. So they're going to love a crazy pink Sylvaneth force, or they're going to love something a bit more different and really kind of unusual, and an unusual treatment of an army that would otherwise be normally familiar.
Yeah.
And it's that sort of stuff that I think gets the popular vote a bit more in painting competitions. So there's a guy who wins a lot with just like a turquoise. It's like a mixed order list, but it's all in just kind of...
Yeah, he was at Cardiff.
Oh, right.
I've seen it in real life. It's very nice.
It's beautiful. Yeah, it's really beautiful, but it's so unconventional, and it's like, it's not how you'd paint any of those units normally. And it's that difference, I think, that people latch onto as much as anything. You know, the beautifully painted, Barak Zolfin Caradron list that everyone runs, but it's just going to look like a GW army, whereas people want to see new stuff. And then you got to shock and kind of awe a little bit, I think. I
think you do. I think there's a bit of an X factor in those, like, I think partly if painting and painting competitions are a priority, and this is something that I was thinking about, like, because I think I am far more likely to be able to win either a sportsmanship gong or a painting gong before I ever win an actual playing games and winning them gong.
Especially if you keep like rolling Croak-Nado in your first game in every tournament.
Yeah. But like, so there's, but a factor, something I hadn't considered is when it's player voted, particularly at a big event, people go to events with their mates and often with their clubs. And if someone is nominated and is the only person from the club who's nominated, they will get a voting spike because of that. And that's not like, I don't think that happened in this case, but it was something that occurred to me because I saw it happening in other competitions. Like, you know, I went and browsed the 40k entries and the Horus Heresy entries, which were also great, but you could see guys in their team jerseys and there'd be like 15, 16 guys all crowded around one entry going like, oh, Jim got the thing, like make sure we all vote for him.
Yeah.
Like that is an X factor that you do not have to deal with in Golden Demon, right? Like, and so that's worth considering as well. Like, I think it's a bit of a roll of the dice sometimes if that's what's important to you. Like, for me, it was just a nice kind of like, oh, that's a nice thing to have, and it was cool to set my army out and have people walk past it and have a look and not understand it. I did hear one guy say, I'm not voting for that Siege. Which was just like, oh, for fuck's sake.
You do have there's definitely, more so than almost any other list, I think Zinch have got a bad rep. Just since they came out for whatever reason.
Why does everyone hate my Gribble, man?
Yeah, I mean, I remember we ran into it in the doubles tournament in Bristol. It was like people would look at your beautifully based army and be like, oh, Zinch. That's what people think.
Yeah, and then they play me, and I'm the stupidest, unluckiest man alive. Apart from that one time the Lord of Change saved 22 things. Which is justice more than anything else. Man, yeah, so that was London GT.
Sounded intense.
It was. I came away from it completely exhausted, but ultimately more excited to paint and play more Age of Sigmar than I thought I would after the first day, if that makes sense.
Sounds like a rough first day.
Yeah. But it was like, there's just so much like, it takes so much work to be good at having fun in that environment, I think. Like, I after I lost that big first game, I just went and started drinking. Like, I get the first beer in early. Cause like, fuck it. Like, it doesn't matter. I'm there to have fun. And I think one thing I did come away from it though is I'd like to do more narrative events. I think it's possible to single out events that are more geared towards the type of play that I want to do. Yeah. Necessarily. And that's not to say I don't want to have those games against the meta stuff, because I don't mind losing and I don't care about like, I want to ultimately have fun, and it is possible to have fun while also getting tabled by a Magic Frog, to be honest. But it's probably possible to invest the time and money it takes to go to an event in going to events where you're more likely to hit the compatible attitude more of the time. Yeah,
we should look into narrative events. The thing I seem to have observed whenever I've looked into them is that they come with extremely complicated rules packs that just heap on rules upon rules upon an already complicated game, and that puts me off quite a lot. But
there's also usually a hobby side to that in terms of prep.
That's true as well. Yeah, you have to buy and paint up models specifically for a lot of those tournaments. But yeah, we should keep an eye out and see if we find any good ones.
Yeah, we should do. So I did also play in a Shadespire Grand Clash, but we are short on time and we've got quite a lot of questions to go through.
Sure.
So I'm just going to say this. Don't make changes to your deck, not test them whatsoever, and then lose all of your games.
Very good
advice. That's my hot tip.
Very good advice.
Hot tip. I got annihilated. Maybe I could talk about it another time if we talk about Shadespire, because actually someone did ask us to pick up back on Shadespire and where it's at, but
yeah, we can play some games for the next one. In fact, who knows, they might have announced a new Shadespire by then, the way things are going.
I think it'll be later in the year, but I'd love to talk about it because it was a nuts day, and as you know, I take Shadespire quite seriously, so me coming directly at the bottom of the rankings and getting the wooden spoon prize is new for me.
Did you get an actual wooden spoon?
I got some objective cards that I was told was the wooden spoon prize, but then everybody got them.
You got the special ones.
Yeah. Good. I got, if you want to, I'm in danger of getting into it, but like if you want to hear about me in matchups.
Why not?
So Magos Fiends round 1, the worst possible matchup for Clone Blood Reavers. Aggressive Orcs round 2, an alright matchup. Extremely passive Stormcast round 3, a sad matchup. And then aggro Stormcast round 4, a really fun matchup and the best game of the day, which is my theme, basically. Like,
aggressive Stormcast. I hate those passive, defensive lists in Shadespire.
Yeah.
My least favourite to play. They're really annoying.
I had a real time. But, and I really couldn't have, as I documented on Twitter at the time, couldn't have fallen harder into the bin if I tried. Like, it was really stupid. I just made some changes and I ran an experimental deck that I hadn't tested, and it just didn't work. It just didn't work. There's not a broader point. Like, I was quite happy with how I played in a lot of the situations. It was just, I'm holding 6 upgrades. What the fuck am I going to do? Like, Blood Reavers won the entire thing. So Blood Reavers are good. Yeah. Don't worry about Blood Reavers. Just worry about me. And a very similar deck to mine as well, just without the stupid thing I did. And didn't test. So there's really no need to talk about it for an hour because I did that. However, I did have the best first turn of my life. I killed Angarad and Steelheart in the first round.
Did you win?
Yeah.
I won that. Did you not win?
Yeah. I killed Oberyn in the second activation of the second round.
That's very good.
Yeah. It was just like, well,
that must be the saddest Stormcast.
It was the happiest Arnulf you've ever seen. It was Arnulf with Hero Slayer and Mighty Swing on the first round.
Oh, so you got them both. One go.
He got Angarad, didn't get Steelheart. And then Steelheart got bopped on the head by someone else. Okay. That's my story. Anyway, let's do questions because we really don't have time to talk about it. Juice writes, Dear miniaturists, I write this sitting on a balcony, staring out at the coastline of Tobago.
Lovely.
It's nice. I've been reading some 40k novels while I'm here. Putting the two together has given me a thought. When we talk about representation in minisgaming, we're almost always talking about gender and race. I think both of these are important, but it feels like there's a third thing we never seem to talk about, culture. Both 40k and AOS are heavily influenced by Western culture. This is both understandable and overall fine. GW is a British company after all. However, I would love to see some more influences from around the world, if only for increased variety. Do you think it's even possible for GW to do this without being kind of racist? Or could GW pull a Black Panther and insert some Western culture in their largely Western setting in a respectful and successful way? Are there cultural elements you'd like to see that are currently not there? I'm aware that, blah, blah, blah. I'm going down to the pool now. It's the juice.
Yeah, man, having a lovely life.
So I would like to draw attention to the White Scars and the way they are written in a lot of the early Horus Heresy novels.
Right.
Because they're sort of, Golden Horde, kind of Genghis Khan derived, sort of like, ostensibly a kind of Asian influence Space Marine chapter. Right. And the writing is unforgivable, basically. Right. Like, there's no reason they shouldn't speak excellent fake Latin, given, like, they're a sort of, I don't know how best to describe it. Like, yeah, it's not good, basically. No, and that's...
Yeah. I think the point you're making, the question is correct, is that if GW were to attempt too much of that, there's only one way it's going to look, even if you were to get the right voices in to do it. Like, it's such a difficult territory.
The thing is, like, 40k is set, like, so we joked about this in the last episode, like, it is inexplicable that no matter what planet you're on, you go through the Space Marine process and you come out as Mark Strong.
Yeah.
You come out as British actor Mark Strong. It's so pervasive, the kind of British Space Marine thing, that it can be sort of glossed as a stylistic choice. A naive stylistic choice, but a stylistic choice. In every other regard, it is the 41st millennium. There's no reason any Earth culture should be outwardly visible. And whenever they attempt it, it comes off really, really weird.
Yeah.
So I take the Britishness of spacemen as a stylistic choice in the same way as the fact that you read them speaking English, but they're actually speaking Gothic. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
yeah, I think both in the fantasy setting and in the futuristic setting, it's almost a blessing that it stops them from having to do this. Because other fantasy fictions that try and do this almost always just make stereotypes of entire cultures. And
well, the old world, basically. This is one of the good things about AOS compared to the old world, right? Like, it's detached itself from real history. Not to say that, obviously, Warhammer wasn't real history. It actually happened. But it was, it's like we've got some Holy Roman Empire era, like, Germans over here, and we have some mythological French people over here, and we've got, like, some, Spanish people down in Tilia, I think. Or, you know what I mean? Like, I was fundamentally grounded in European history, and it's like, that weakens it, I think, ultimately.
It was at least grounded in European history. So for example, the thing that made the Warhammer Fantasy work in the old world was that, for example, the Bretonnians drew on Arthurian legend a lot, and a lot of mythology, basically. It was basically about kind of folk lore made flesh. But you never saw, like, a samurai faction and a kind of...
Cathay.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't remember that. Was that an whole army?
It was never, I don't think they ever had miniatures, but they're in the fiction.
There's kind of like, so you're right, there's a strong Germanic influence, like the Reichlanders and stuff like that.
But there's also stuff like, sort of, like, indigenous South American culture is heavily in that game. They're just lizard men.
Yeah. Yep.
Like, like, it's not a strength, and the more you move...
But that's like Aztec. That's like Aztec.
Yeah, but they still weren't lizard people.
No, like, I know, but that's like mythology. It's about making mythology into...
Yeah, I get that. I just think it's better for everybody when you detach this stuff from those kinds of origins, right? Like, it can be influenced by, like, what I'm saying is, totally influenced by Aztec mythology, but they also chose to locate it in Lustria, which happened to be on a continent to the west of the Europe mainland, in the south of that continent.
Yeah.
Like, it's a bit like Warcraft does exactly the same thing, right? Like,
yeah, you're right. It's not great when they try and do this, but, like, the best thing to do is look at other model ranges. Like, there's some sweet models being made in Japan, like mecha, like extremely expensive mecha models, but beautiful ones. Follow Tom Walton on Twitter for lovely
Tau. Tau is sort of a weird example of this, because there are aspects of that aren't that good from a cultural sensitivity point of view, but were a way of including obviously Japanese inspired mecha designs into 40k in a way.
Yeah.
It can work. It's like, I want them to represent more of humanity without feeling a need to represent culture specifically, and in fact add more things that are unique to those settings and not outwardly just openly derived from real history, because I think often that history is presented without its context or without its consequences or real weight. Like, something I really like about Age of Sigmar is that, you know, its fantasy races do not exist in solely in enclaves are examples of that, but like the big sort of cities of order are, you know, every fantasy race, elves and dwarves and humans and things living together. It's much more cosmopolitan fantasy than Tolkien kind of established, where Tolkien's fantasy races map onto specific real world historical cultures in a way that risks being pretty dicey from that point of view.
Yeah.
So moving forward into the Age of Sigmar thing, where it doesn't really matter if you're a dwarf, you can be from anywhere and adhere to any faction, is a good thing. Like, yeah. Less, please, basically, is what I'm saying. But yeah.
Yeah, more abstraction and more, I mean, the 40k universe is quite capable of carrying entirely new, amazing transhuman factions like the Mars cults. Yeah. That's an awesome idea.
Yeah,
it doesn't have to be tied to any particular...
the Mechanicus aren't based on any specific...
It's just a cool sci-fi thing, right? And everyone can have fun with that without accidentally, doing a wrong.
Yeah. And they all speak like robot Oxford Dons, but that's fine.
That's just 40k.
Our next question comes from Adam, who writes, "Hi, Chris and Tom. I'm just embarking on a Thousand Suns army, and I want to keep the warp flame really consistent across the models. How do you do yours, Chris?" Thanks, Adam. So I just thought I'd answer this super quick.
Yeah.
My warp flame recipe has changed quite a lot over the time. Currently, it's white base, then warpstone glow, not warpstone glow, the green, what's the green glaze called? I've gone completely blank.
Coelia,
the glaze, a Waywatcher green.
Right.
Waywatcher green, wet blended with a little bit of, Lamenter's yellow glaze in spots towards the center of the flame, because it gives it just a little bit of yellow, makes it feel more flamish. Then it looks less like toothpaste. Or cabbage, which are the two problems I've had with the previous recipe.
How did you get away from cabbage?
Yellow.
Just yellow.
Yeah. Huh. There's no yellow wink at the burning heart of a cabbage.
What's the pity?
Yeah. Then a little bit of Athonia Camera shade wet blended with, Coelia green shade towards the tips of the flame. It's basically just shades. And then if you want to darken up a bit on the tips and make it, you can sometimes return to the base with white and dry brush like a dark green, or like an Inky by Darkness onto the very tips of the flame. That's basically it.
Nice.
Let's see. Travis writes, "Hello, yous. I don't play miniatures games, but your talk of managing huge piles of dice got me a thinking. I think I can design and 3D print a hand-cranked dice dispenser. A dice dispenser, if you will. It could have a digital readout to display the number of dice dispensed, and a button to reset the counter. An optical interrupt counter would give very accurate and reliable counts. This is a good idea. The folks at the Discord channel suggested that it be shaped like a dice-vomiting skull, with a spot on top for dribbly candles. Bonus question, what's with the aversion of dice-rolling smartphone apps in tabletop gaming? Love, Travis."
Yeah.
Cheating is the aversion.
Yeah, totally. But I dig this question because I wish there was like if we're going to get into 480 attack skeletons, I'd love there to be like a thing that, a little screen by the side of the thing where both players can see you inputting the rolls and then press a button and then have it turn up.
Yeah.
Because rolling 480 dice is dumb. Rolling 200 dice is dumb. It's just not a good, like, way of working out what's going on the tabletop. And this is why stuff like X-Wing and, the new Star Wars tabletop game is Legion are great, because they do a lot of crunching with the very much fewer dice rolls. And I wish they would do that in Warhammer.
I do like rolling dice physically.
It's tactile.
I don't like rolling that many dice.
That's the thing, is 10, 20, fine. Hundreds should never happen. I think that's just terrible. I think that's just bad. It's bad for both players, because it's hard for your opponent to see what's really happening as well, as you're picking loads of dice out that have missed and then re-rolling the rest again. And they're going everywhere, and you're just rolling onto the tabletop and they're knocking over miniatures and stuff. It's just not how it should work. And you could get the same odds out of fewer dice. But if we're going to go down the road of rolling 480 attacks, then let's get a little machine that does it on the side.
Yeah, I can see that. And the reason for the aversion is simply that obviously machines, a counting machine is one thing, a dice rolling app, they exist for game systems, but there's, unless both players are using the same stuff, it's like your suggestion, Tom, that works, but unless both players are using the same stuff, it's a little bit cagey, like apps, obviously dice can be weighted and things. Maybe that's the benefit of fucking millions of dice is very hard to cheat on that scale and not have it be blindingly obvious.
Yeah.
But I'd say that there's more distrust towards digital apps when it comes to cheating or weighting the odds or things than...
Yeah. There's something honest about rolling dice, but rolling hundreds of dice again, you just get it back into silly territory.
And no one likes it there.
No.
That's
where the horses are.
Pete writes, hello Chris and Tom, the wizard and the newly announced armoured wizard. My question this month is, do you think the GW will move away from physical books in the near future for gaming? I love owning my small library of codexes and battle tomes, but they do suffer from an inconvenience factor when it comes to indulging all the FAQ changes, something that would probably be much less of a problem with an updated digital documents. Is this something modern GW would consider, or are the physical books here to stay? Love the pod. Pete/Fienya.
No, I think that they're totally here to stay. I think GW love printing books. They print so many of them, and I think like loads of people buy them. I own 2 Stormcast battle tomes, and I'm going to own a 3rd one soon, and a rule book, and I don't mind. It's fine. They make them big, beautiful publications full of full colour art and loads of lore and fluff and stuff. And I think they take a lot of pride in their printed publications, actually. So I think there's no chance of them disappearing soon.
No. So when I got into iOS, I thought I would go digital books only using the app. Unfortunately, that is not good. Because the app is not as good as it could be. So I agree with you. I think there's pleasure in owning the physical books. I think they should totally sell digital copies of the books.
Absolutely. But
the digital copies of the books are actively quite unpleasant to use for in-game stuff because you're flicking through PDFs. That's basically what you've got.
Oh, right, yeah.
If it was better indexed, it would be a different matter. And then there's an issue with, for example, Azir, which is the subscription list building app, where because I don't own, for example, the Disciples of Tzeentch battle tome in Azir, because I have it in real life, I can't use the rules for any of the battalions or anything like that.
Yeah.
What I think they should do is, and they could maybe even increase the cost of Azir or have it as a bolt-on, is I would totally pay for a rules subscription service that got you only the battle tome specific rules and nothing else from the battle tomes. So your app, if my iPad could easily pull down any battalion from any battle tome or any battle plan from any battle tome.
So like $5 a month.
Yeah, I'd totally pay for that.
Yeah.
Cause, it stops me from buying every book that comes out, but I'm not going to buy every book that comes out.
No.
You buy the books for the armies you really care about, but you subscribe for everything else. That I would do. Particularly if it incorporated that stuff more seamlessly into the app. The issue is that the app's not good enough to sustain it at the moment, so...
No.
Yeah.
I think, hopefully, maybe at some point in the future, they'll look at X-Wing 2.0, which, we haven't seen that app yet, but app integration, I think, is a great thing for war games and could potentially demystify and decomplicate. That's not even a word, but it could do that.
It could really yank the curtain.
It could really yank the curtain back on that wargaming and make it super horse. That's what I'm saying.
We're getting horse.
It's been a long pod.
Yeah, we've drank quite a lot.
Yeah, that's true. Got a few beers.
Yes, there was I can't remember what I was going to say. There was a good app at London GT for scores. It was good.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, that's good.
It was good.
GW's app rules integration could be much better, and I'd love to see them improve that.
Yeah. Yank that curtain, GW. Kingsley writes, Hi Chris and Tom. Often the most impressive model on the table is the centerpiece, where the designers get to cram all the extra detail that won't fit on a normal Mini. The model I'm most pleased with in my collection is my Carnosaur, with its hundreds of individually highlighted scales. But I can't help eyeing up the Start Collecting Sylvaneth box with that big old Tree Lord in it. What are your favourite not-so-miniature miniatures? I think we can all guess the Lord of Change and Stardrake from your own collections, but what about the wider range? Cheers, Kingsley.
Ooh.
Good question.
Yeah, I do like the Bloodthirsters.
I
super
something
old
about the way they're leaping that makes is like, I like this, but it's slightly more frolicky than you would think.
You think they're more like kind of Pan in the forest?
So Scarbrand, the Scarbrand model is sort of like quite planted on the ground. And kind of like, I'm going to fight you.
Because his wings are
broken. Yeah. But the rest of the Bloodthirsters are sort of mid-skip in a way that I find quite charming. But it's sort of, it's not very corny. Well, it's very corny, but it's not
Cahorny.
Yeah.
They're
not cahorny.
I like their frosty, there's something very old school. They remind me of the old world, I think, the Bloodthirsters, even though they're like relatively, I don't think they're very old kits at all. I think they're relatively new.
It's because they're Balrogs, Tom.
It's because they're Balrogs. I love a good Balrog. What can I say? Nagash is amazing. I love that model. I love the Nagash
and there's
model.
many books.
There's many swirling books and his enormous ridiculous staff. He's great.
I like Archaon quite a lot. Like, so honestly, I think this is not my point, but it's something I'm nicking from someone else. Really good advice if you're not sure what army to collect in a faction or in a game is like just filter the Games Workshop store by monster and pick the monster that you want, because everything else in the faction will stem off from that.
That's probably
like, if you like that monster, you probably like the rest of the faction. With that in mind, I like the what's the Magmadroth, the Fire Slayer, lava, dragon, salamander beast.
They're pretty cool.
That's good. Cool. I like that.
Did you see the new Khorne dragon?
Yeah, I like it, but I wouldn't feel compelled to.
Oh, it's the size of my house.
It is.
It's enormous.
I'd love that if I finally got that, just showed up like, you finished your Star Drake.
It's like, oh, I got this.
That's not a dragon. That's not a horse. This is a horse.
It's Khorne's turn.
That's a very big horse. I think in terms of 40k Knights, the obvious one, because they look amazing.
Yeah,
I just really want to own one. I like a lot of the aircraft in 40k. I don't know if they count as centerpieces. I think they could probably do.
Should do.
Yeah.
Is it the Thunderhawk? I almost call it a Thundercat, which would have
Thunderhawk.
It's the Thunderhawk. Yeah, that's beautiful. That's a beautiful thing.
Thunderhawks are stop. There was, I'll show a picture. Did I show you the picture of the Thunderhawk from the best painted the 40k, 30k, sorry?
Pretty amazing.
It was insane.
Yeah, that's super nice.
Yeah.
Man, 40k is awesome sometimes.
Yeah, it is. I love them. Yeah, it really is.
I love that Redemptor Dreadnought actually for the Primaris range. That's super sweet. I've not actually seen the Repulsor tank in the flesh, but the rest of it is great.
It's big.
Yeah.
Big and square, like a Space Marine tank.
Just like a Primaris.
Yeah. Next question comes from Robert, who writes, "Hi, Minis Monthly. One of my sci-fi fantasy pet peeves is female warriors wearing high heels, so when I began work on my Escher gang, I green stuffed their shoes into slightly more combat-appropriate platform wedges. Surprisingly, they turned out great. Flush with success, I gave my gang leader a full flak armor vest and modelled a flowing cape for a champion.
Nice.
Considering I'd never worked that extensively with green stuff, my teenage-era Gondor soldiers looked like Nurgle troops after I finished with them. I was really proud of my work and shocked I was able to pull it off. So a couple of questions. Have you ever gone out of your way to fix a model's look? Also, have you ever looked at a finished piece and thought, something I made shouldn't look this good? Congrats on the beautiful minis you've posted, Robert."
I'm terrified of modding green stuff, though I'd love to try it. As we mentioned earlier in the pod, I wanted to put cloaks on my Stormcast, but didn't think I'd ever have the sculpting power to make that happen. I'm pretty worried about green stuff and kind of using it wrongly in a way that I accidentally end up messing up the texture of the surface of the models if I'm trying to fill gaps and do stuff. So actually sculpting stuff out of it seems like a distant goal.
Yeah, I don't like, so that it was like gone out of your way to fix a model. I'm not sure I necessarily have. I've done a lot of like little bits of green stuff and things for my Zangor. May they ever one day arrive. Which I've talked about before. And that wasn't so much about fixing so much as, well, I suppose in some ways it was like, I really wanted to make sure that the the weapon options were represented on the models. Because, that's a mad war scroll at the best of times.
Yeah.
It's weapon options. So like, you know, when someone is both, like, you know, make sure that all the ones that are mutants have some kind of mutation with green stuff. Like the Hornblower, like, I also wanted him to be a mutant, so I gave him one flaming hand from a pink horror, but he's got two swords crossed on his back to establish that he's still dual wielding, you know, for the sake of that rule. So like, just that sort of what you see is what you get thing. Used tip of a Sangor enlightened spear and attached it to the bottom of the banner so that the standard bearer can also be a great weapon bearer.
Nice.
So that as if the standard is actually like on the end of a long spear.
Yeah.
Which just makes it, just helps it gel. Because otherwise you look at that guy and like, what is he armed with? Other than a flag. And like, well, there you go. There's a spearhead.
I modified my branch witch a bit. So the branch witch's soul normally has like an almost kind of grub on her shoulder. But I also looked kind of dumb. So took a bit of terrain and kind of hacked it up and had the grub coming out of that and then her standing on the top of it. Just little things, really.
Yeah.
That felt like fixing that model because the model seemed super imbalanced with the way it was actually originally sculpted.
I'm quite confident with green stuff now for fixing models. I'm getting much more confident with Milliput for bases, which is what I use a lot of for that.
So is that just like a clay or is it?
It's like, quite a fine clay. It's a lot softer when you're working it than green stuff, so I find it easier for like sculpting. So I've just done this for, a model that will hopefully be done relatively soon. My Slanesh favouring Chaos Lord.
Yeah.
Because he ships, not even with a round base, he ships one of those old sculpted square bases.
Oh, okay.
So I had to kind of find a way of molding that onto I'll show you when we're done recording. But I basically built him a hill out of Milliput.
Nice.
And bedded the old square base into it, essentially with, he's going to be on a sort of flaming charcoal lava pit thing. So I, made some progress with that. So, but yeah, in terms of sculpting whole model elements, I've done pennants and sort of like scrolls and things for my Siege characters, but nothing major yet. The other part of this question was, have you ever looked at a finished piece and thought something I made shouldn't look this good? Which I think is how you feel about that horse's ass.
That's exactly right. It's the first time I've ever felt this about a model. But I'm there now. I feel like I've crossed the threshold of
It's good when that happens, isn't
some
it?
sort, yeah.
Yeah. I feel this way about my Dark Earth Chieftain. I think he's the best model I've done.
Yeah, he's awesome. Yeah. Feels like you suddenly, you get that level up ding over your head. You're like,
It was basically an accident. It's just like, I'd done this and it turned out really well.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
You're like, yeah, it turned out exactly how I envisioned it.
Yeah.
That's the main thing. It's why I didn't have to, backtrack or fix anything. It's just that's exactly how I wanted it to look. And
Yeah, good.
That's
Can
crazy.
Stop now.
Yeah,
Bye.
that's the end of my hobby.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Our final question comes from Drew, who writes, "Hello, Chris and Tom. I recently had a bad experience with games where after the fact I've discovered my opponents have made favourable mistakes when counting up their points or for their units rules. I mostly play with random people in store or at clubs, so I'm not that worried about playing them again. However, finding out after the fact that I've been up against a stacked deck is a bit wearing on the fun. What would your thoughts be on how to avoid this in the future? Asking to see lists before games to check rules and points seems unreasonable. Similarly, having my own copy of their codex open during the game seems unsporting. Maybe just the price for taking part in the hobby. Thanks for the pods, Drew."
Yeah, we touched on this before about having just a degree of trust about what your opponent is doing with all their dice rolls and their war scrolls and things. There's so much complexity in the hobby that there's a lot of trust involved. You'd hope that people check the army lists though. Like, one was you had to hand in your army list and presumably if it was wrong, you'd be corrected.
Yeah, you should have to do that in any tournament.
Yeah.
Incidentally, fun Shadespire fact, not only did I come dead last, I did worse than a guy who arrived with an illegal deck. Because he'd only ever played Shadespire with his mates and he didn't know that, lovely bloke, genuinely didn't know that he had to have the same number of upgrades as ploys.
Yeah.
So he had like a couple of upgrades and loads of ploys, because ploys are really good.
Right.
But they let him remake his deck.
Okay.
Which is very kind of the tournament organisers and I think the right thing to do.
Yeah,
so someone doesn't waste the journey. But he still did better than me. So that's just an update from the bin.
Okay. More to come.
I also did worse than a guy who dropped.
Oh, shit.
Out of the event.
Oh, how is that possible though?
Because if you play more, you can lose more. It was a great time. I had a good time. So I think this is one of the reasons, not the reason, but it's a reason to be as friendly and sporting and open about your own rules as you can. Because I think it buys you goodwill that you can use to ask the right questions. Like, I think the only way around this is to know the fundamentals of the game extremely well. You're not going to know every army. To know your own rules extremely well, so that you can answer similar questions very quickly. And between those two things, hopefully develop a sense of, that doesn't sound right to me.
Yeah.
Because I've had that on things before. And if you are sufficiently friendly to play with the rest of the time, if you ask your opponent, does it really work that way? Or, oh, cool. Could you just show me like how that works? Because I've never encountered this before. then you are more likely to get a positive response to that, I think, because you've shown yourself to be kind of willing to do it. It's a bit of a strategic thing, to be honest. Like, if you are kind of nice and friendly and super open about your own rules and willing to rule in your opponent's favor, then if you go like, oh, I didn't realize smite was D6 mortal wounds, whatever, right? You can go, oh, actually it isn't. Oh, and then you obviously, if you feel like you've caught them in a cheaty mistake, then you can just give them the benefit of the doubt. And then the next cheaty mistake, it's basically extremely passive aggressive is the solution to this problem.
Well, you just go get the TO and then everything's awkward for a bit, but then it resolves. Which is what happened.
Yeah, right.
In a tournament. But that was just the result of, instinctively knowing, having played a fair bit of AOS, what things can or can't do in the game, roughly. So if something can just like go from one side of the board to another, that I would like to know how that happened in turn one, you know what I mean? It's like, sure, some things can do that in the game, definitely. But
how did this one do that?
But how did this one really do that? Because that's like a really advanced thing for any unit to be able to do in this game about moving everywhere.
Yeah. The trump card to that is just point and go, is a horse.
And then it's like, well, okay, fair enough.
Yeah, exactly.
One of Nagash's favourites.
Yeah.
Yes. So just, I don't know, instincts. It's so much trust and just kind of, it's thorny.
It's thorny, but I think if you are nice and good to play with, you will inevitably, therefore, put yourself in the best position for other people to enjoy playing with you. And if those people are good, then you get to keep playing with them. And if they're not, then you're in the best position to have the moral high ground in any subsequent dispute.
That's all that matters.
Indeed. The high horse, if you will.
The sweet high horse.
Yeah. That is all the questions we've got. And it may well be time for us to yank the curtain
for the final time.
For the final time this month on this podcast. If you'd like to send us a question for a future episode of Miniatures Monthly, you can do so by emailing us at miniatures@crateandcrowbar.com. As ever, this podcast is supported by the Crate and Crowbar Patreon, which supports the main Crate and Crowbar PC gaming podcast and its spin-offs. If you'd like to find out more about that, you can do so at patreon.com/Crate and Crowbar. Tom, where do people find your miniatures pictures and those hot winking horse asses?
Sweet. I need to take a picture of a dedicated picture.
You need to do that. And you need to send it to me by tomorrow so I can put it in the show.
So I'm on Instagram at Ludo Paints Minis, which is LUDO Paints Minis.
Give a like to that horse ass.
Yeah.
I'm on Instagram at Exit Warp, which is EXITWARP. Where you'll find my picture of a very horny gentleman. You were also on Twitter, Minis Monthly.
Yes, that's good. Follow that.
Yeah, which is, where we post pictures of stuff we're working on and games and nonsense. And on Twitter as individuals as well.
I'm at PCG Ludo, which is LUDO. I'm not tweeting about games there, but whatever. If you want to follow me there, it's all good.
I brought it up, so I'll finish. It's at C Thurston for me, which is CTHURSTEN. And that's it for us.
Yeah. Another month down. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks for listening.